Right, Ate Mare, good morning and welcome to Economic Growth Committee of the 18th of September. A couple of things I want to say. First thing, that it is Māori Language Week, and if people could use phrases through the meeting, that would be wonderful. And I want to make one more acknowledgement. It is Sina's last meeting today, and I want to just acknowledge that. She's been a fantastic administrator and we will miss her. She's going off to another department in the council. So good luck to Sina. I'd like to first off to open the meeting with karakia from Councillor Sabellin. No, I did it right.
Ngā tamari e whānau, nau mai ki te wiki o te reo rangatira, te reo Māori. Me noi tātou. Tūtaua mai I runga, tūtaua mai I raro, tūtaua mai I roto, tūtaua mai I waho. Kia tau ai te Māori tū, te Māori ora, ki te katoa, haumi e, hui e, tai ki e. Amihi.
First off, I'd like to call for apologies, and we don't have any, so we'll move on to the next. I'm sorry. Oh, first off, sorry, we'll do the housekeeping. So housekeeping, we have the meeting has been recorded and live streamed on the Council's YouTube channel. Health and safety requirements for the Council chamber are shown on and displayed on the screen. And yeah, basically that if there is a fire and emergency, we will go through the exits. There's one in front of us there, one out there, and there's that door there. But we'll follow Sarah out and she'll take us out in an orderly manner out through the doors. All online participants, which we don't actually have any online participants, but if there is anybody online, put a camera on so that we can see who you are. And any amendments, could you please get them through to the administrator before we put them up onto the screen for any amendments, just for courtesy for everybody going forward. And that's all I need to do for that. Moving on now to apologies. We don't have any. Next one is additional items. I haven't had any additional items. So we'll move on to declarations of interest. Does anybody have any declarations of interest for this meeting? No. Okay. We'll move on to public comment. We have got a little bit of public comment this morning, which is lovely. First off, we are going to hear from Pete French, and he's going to come and talk to us today about Featherston Street. So Pete, do you want to come up to the front? Billy, you might want to give him a hand. Yep, he's good, he's got it. So Pete, you've got 3 minutes. What I'm going to do with public comment this morning, because we've got 4 people giving us public comment, is we're not going to ask any questions, councillors. We're just going to let them have 3 minutes each. They've all been advised of this. So they're just going to get their 3 minutes each, and they know that, and they're just going to go for their life with their 3 minutes. So we'll advise them of that by giving them a signal when their 3 minutes are up. So your 3 minutes starts now, Pete.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm actually talking more about Vogel Street than Featherston Street. You may remember me being here a few months ago. This is just a short update. After the meeting here last a few months ago, I met with Daniel. Daniel contacted me, so I went in. Daniel of, look here. He is the Service Manager, Traffic and Road Safety. Yeah, and we went down there and had a look. And this is, we're talking about the section of road between Featherston Street and Hayden Street. We're talking Vogel Street. And I was proposing, you might recall, this is just a quick recap, I was proposing a design, a roundabout situation, but without a physical roundabout, where all traffic approaching Vogel Street intersections with Hayden Street and Featherston Street would need to slow down a bit and give way to any traffic coming from the right. So that was the idea I was proposing. And I was saying that the design could save the City Council money by eliminating the possible need of land purchases. What else? Right turn bays into Featherston Street and Hayden Street would become unnecessary. Yeah, and through traffic in Vogel Street would flow further from cyclists, parked cars, footpaths and residential units. So I was saying it had some advantages, this idea of everybody and the people coming up Featherston Street, coming up Hayden Street, that they give way to their right. And once people enter Vogel Street and they want to turn right, they would have right of way. That's essentially what I'm saying. They have right of way. So I would call that, let's call that Plan B. Plan A is the right turn bay idea, right turn bays. Plan B is roundabout, without a roundabout idea, give way to your right, let the traffic have right of way when it's turning right. And then after talking with Daniel in June, on that morning, before meeting Daniel, I was out there at 6:55 a.m. to 9:40 a.m. observing the traffic. It's really good to observe what's going on. And what I observed was most of the time there were no issues, just short delays, mainly for right-turning vehicles, with the drivers seemingly very familiar with the road. All traffic flowed well. So generally speaking, the motorists know what to do there, and things go pretty well. And so this is to come up with Plan C. I just mentioned, how much time have I got now?
Got 16 seconds.
Oh, yeah, Plan C is essentially pretty well leave everything as it is, put some white lines in to make sure you've got 4 lanes there, and maybe no parking during certain peak times. That's Plan C, and we'll come back another time and maybe talk more about Plan C as another alternative.
Thank you, Pete. You're all done. And Glenn has been writing notes furiously. Just over here, he's going to put his hand up. He's writing notes furiously, and he might get in touch with you at some stage.
Yes,
okay, Pete?
yes,
Thank you very much for coming in.
Okay, and it's in an email to Daniel in June.
Great.
Yeah,
thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you.
Great. Right. The person that's coming in is Harvey Jones from Ashurst. So Harvey's here to talk about tolls, non-tolling, and I'm going to leave that to you, and your 3 minutes will start now.
Thank you, the Mayor, councillors, members of the public and media. I'm here in support of councillors Brent Barrett and Lorna Johnson to oppose the road tolls of the new road Te Ahu Aturanga. First, some comments about my reading of the officer report on item 2.1 and 2.3. Yes, the most expensive toll road in the country. At $4.30, this would amount to $1,000 travel cost extra per year for a commuter travelling from the other side, and that's depending on whether the ambiguous thing is 24-hour road toll or each way, as it says. If it could be double that cost. By the NZTA's own reckoning, 37% of all traffic may be using alternative routes to cross over the hill. That amounts to 4,000 vehicles a day, according to the Radio New Zealand checkpoint thing last night. There is an economic risk to the local region if this funding is diverted to road tolls and lost to our local economy. Some travellers may decide it is cheaper to shop on the other side of the hill rather than come over here. The alternative routes being used by these by these motorists will receive national road funding for maintenance at the moment. These include with the loss of that going to the main road, this will include P&CT costs of damage to Ashurst streets and also the pay to a track. This maintenance cost is not mentioned in the officer's report. Now, from my own perspective as an Ashurst resident, our community has endured 7 years or more of thousands of extra traffic passing through our streets. This has divided the village, Salisbury Street and Mulgrave Street, and there's over 300 families living on the wrong side of the tracks. They have to get their families have to get to the schools, the shops, and connect up through busy, heavy traffic and all sorts of things. This is not going to go away with the opening of the new road if 37% of the traffic continues to use the alternative road, primarily the Saddle Road. Ashurst roads were not built for this type of traffic. They were built on graded metal roads out of the gravel pit. It's vibration, there's vibration that can be felt streets back. I don't know if you've ever felt that, but, in the middle of the night, the trucks are rumbling through, they will still continue to rumble through and keep you awake. This is a retrospective change in legislation. The road has been planned, costed and budgeted to be originally opened in December this year and now opened in June or July next year. To change the rules and without any further public consultation like this is nuts. If you, as our elected councillors, support the proposed road toll on Te Ahu Aturanga, then you are supporting the ongoing division. Can I get rid of that? Yeah. Shut up. 3 minutes is up. You're supporting the ongoing division of Ashurst
Harvey.
Highway and sacrificing its community to the dangers and the vibration of the highway traffic through residential streets.
Great, thank you. Right on time, apart from the... Well done, Harvey, thank you. Right, we'll call on the next one, which is Phil Stevens.
Kia ora koutou. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to the committee this morning. Would be echoing a lot of the things that Harvey just quite eloquently put. I would also note that the purpose of this committee is economic development, and that one of the best indicators of economic growth will be the well-being of the community. And the Ashurst community has suffered quite a bit over the past 15 years now, since the first big slip in the Manawatu Gorge, which was cleared at a cost of, I believe, somewhere north of $10 million. And we said back then that had Waka Kotahi used that money and the time that it afforded to start planning an alternate route now, we could have avoided 6 years of waiting around for a decision to be made. When the slip happened in 2017, a lot of people came out and said, this is inevitable, and we said this would happen. So they commissioned yet more expensive reports and surveys and finally decided, yes, they would build a new highway. The highway is a replacement for an existing highway link. This is not a new piece of the roading network. It was built with funding and given assurances to the community more than once that it would not be tolled. So in effect, this current consultation is a reneging on the part of Waka Kotahi on representations that they have already made. So we consider their work to be in bad faith. Also, they have a very poor track record of dealing with the community in terms of traffic mitigation measures and other mitigations to do what they said they were going to do. We had to spend years pressuring them to put in traffic calming, to do road resurfacing, to do the bare minimum to keep our people safe in the community from all this extra traffic. So now we are faced with yet another broken promise and what looks like an interminable flow of thousands of vehicles a day past my letterbox, and we're pretty much over it. The noise, the disruption, the decrease in safety, the particulate emissions, things that actually decrease physical lifespan, and the safety of the residents, particularly kids going to school, is not a trivial matter. And we think that the decision to toll that road link would increase a lot of negatives for the community of Ashurst as well as the wider region.
Thank you. You're right on time. Thanks very much. Right, the last one is Arthur. Thank you, Arthur.
Kia ora tātou. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for allowing me the opportunity to present. On behalf of the recreational horse riding community, we are appalled at the thought of the government installing a toll on the replacement highway, and I refuse to call it a new highway because it is replacing the gorge that was closed between Ashurst and Woodville. We made a mistake 5 years ago when work started on the highway excuse me, as a group, we were community-minded. We thought we would cope with not using Saddle Road as our preferred route to our playground in the Pohangana Valley. And so we decided not to use it. The result is we have had our usable area for exercising our horses and travelling from one point to another in our community severely curtailed. And I have presented to this group before on that. The mistake that we made was not continuing to use the road and put the onus on NZTA to provide us safety measures as vulnerable road users. And in fact, that's what we are. I'm the chair of NZEAN, which is the New Zealand Equestrian Advocacy Network, and we, as a group, have put a petition together. We have about 8 or 9 MPs at central government level who are very interested in supporting our petition. They're going to be accepting that this time next month. Last weekend we had 50 rides throughout the country. I was one who rode through the square here on Saturday with a friend of mine on my horse to highlight the issue that we are vulnerable road users, and the New Zealand Transport Agency doesn't have any way of looking after us at this moment. Our safety was never considered. I know of a person who was seriously considering, he'd gone and done a feasibility study on opening a horse trekking business near Ashurst, and he was going to use those hills as a place to take horses and tourists. Particularly, he said that there was a huge demand for that. He'd done quite a bit of work on it. He's now since left the country and set up in Australia. So there's an opportunity that we've missed as an economic development for our region. If a toll were placed on the replacement highway, the reduction of traffic on Saddle Road, as you know, will be insignificant and therefore a real safety issue. But we intend to start using it again. We're going to now push the point, and it's going to be disruptive. And we don't want to be disruptive, but we need people to listen. And we need people to be thinking about everyone's safety in this region.
Thank you, Arthur.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the 3 presentations, or 4. I'd now like that the committee receive the public comment for information. I'll move that, seconded by Councillor Wood. We have Councillor Johnson that would like to speak.
Thanks, Madam Chair, and kia koutou te whānau. I just wanted to thank those members of the public that came in to speak about the road toll issue. I understand there were other people that also wanted to speak, but the agenda was too full to allow them to be able to participate. So I think it's important that we understand that the people that we've heard from are not perhaps the only people that have got things to say, but we're not able, and perhaps it's not even appropriate given our lack of power in the issue, we're not able to hear from everybody. But there was a very large public meeting last night in Woodville, at which hundreds of people attended, and the messages were heard loud and clear. So I just want to say thank you to those members of the public for taking time out of their day and coming in to speak about the issue. I think it's very important. Thank you.
The Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I wasn't going to speak, but I thought others asked, so I will as well. I too want to thank members of the public. I'll reserve my right to speak about the tolls and the notice of motion and that a little bit later. But Councillor Johnson's right. There was a big meeting yesterday and last night in Woodville. Got home at 10 o'clock by the time I got home, and I'd have to say there was a very, very strong message from the residents. It was disappointing there was nobody from the transport sector there, but from the residents of Tararua, and actually Ashurst and Masterton people as well. Can I just make a comment just around the horse user group, and thanks Arthur for your commentary. We had and this on the Regional Transport Committee, we had a presentation from your group, and I was somewhat saddened that I'm not even sure it was democracy at work, but that group has decided that they didn't support your, and I'm gobsmacked because I can never recall us having a vote on it, but it was a decision made from the chair or from somebody at Regional Council that they didn't support your group, and yet other regional councils around the country have. So I just want to highlight that. It wasn't the view of this council, wasn't the view of me as the representative member on that Regional Transport Committee, and I just want to say that this town, this region has had horses at its origins, so we must acknowledge that the equestrian, the equine, the horse users groups are here and here to stay. So we should actually involve them in our planning and discussions. So thank you, Arthur, for bringing it up, and something that hasn't gone amiss at this council. Thank you.
Thank you, and thanks to Councillor Johnson for bringing up the meeting last night, which I attended as well as Councillor Barrett. There was a lot of people there, and you did feel the heat in the room from a lot of residents, and we do know their pain because people from Ashurst and from Palmerston North, everybody is feeling that the tolls are going to be a problem, but we are here to listen to everybody, and that's what this is about, is listening to the discussion. Okay, let's now vote on receiving public comment. That's passed 15 votes to nil. Thank you. We'll move on to the presentation from the Manawatu Chamber, and we welcome up Amanda Lindsay and Steve Davey, the chairperson. Thank you. You've got 10 minutes.
Tēnā koutou katoa, ko Amanda Lindsley tōku ingoa. I'm the CEO of the Manawatu Business Chamber, and with me today is Steve Davey, my chair, Nikki Moore, the vice chair, and Leanne Anderson, who's my 2IC, who most of you all know. I whakanui ana mutu I te wiki o te reo Māori. Thank you for having us here today. The Manawatu Business Chamber represents a significant part of the city and region from both a GDP and FDE perspective. We'd like to spend our time today with you to provide some feedback, as previously requested, from the business community on several significant points relevant to economic development. We'd just like to cover off rates determination, consultation on the Te Ahua Tuaronga proposed toll, business confidence, and some city conferences and business awards information. But on that note, because we are on the time limit, of course, I'm going to hand you over to Steve, who'll speak to the first point.
Thank you, Amanda, and thank you for the opportunity. The Manawatu Business Chamber is very supportive of any council initiative that supports economic growth in this region. Equally, we feel duty-bound to share our concerns when council's actions are not in keeping with creating a vibrant and growing economy. One recent action has caused some significant concern for the Chamber and its members, that being the decision to go to a hybrid rating methodology with a 50-50 split that was not one of the three options consulted on. Firstly, we are not disputing the legality of those actions, but there is a difference between legality and ethics. To provide three options for consultation and then post-consultation to go with the fourth option allowed no public consultation or the ability to provide feedback. As a chamber, we considered the three options proposed. We used the wonderful calculator that you provided on your website and took an opinion that we could live with all three of those options. But you gave us no ability to consult and provide feedback on option 4, which you subsequently voted on. We do have a huge issue with option 4. In the main, this option penalises the larger and newer building tenants in this city. And I want to stress that I used the word tenants. Let's face it, landlords do not pay rates. It's the people that are the tenants of those buildings. And I really think that we, more often than not, we've actually caused unintended consequences in doing this. We have reviewed certain commercial properties in town with data provided by council staff and noted that in some instances, some will face significant increases in rates as a result of the council's decision. 2 examples, 52% increase in rates and one 84% increase in rates. You are effectively charging the equivalent of a wealth tax on the business community in doing this. I believe that in the same time, you're penalising companies who are huge supporters of this community, i.e. FMG and property brokers, for example, and also anyone else that actually wants to put up their hard-earned money and improve their premises, employ more staff, etc. You're actually discouraging economic growth with this action. Why would you invest in a new factory now when you know you're going to be penalised by council for doing so? I believe that we should be thankful for businesses like property brokers, Toyota New Zealand, FMG as examples of huge supporters of our community in so many different ways. I would hate to think that, by way of a silly example, that property brokers pull some funding for something like Manawatu Striders because of the increase in rates they now face paying. There are unintended consequences here. Can I also say that in some of those buildings, there are little businesses as well. If you look at FMG building, there's a little cafe at the bottom. If you look at the IRD building on Victoria Ave, there's a little restaurant at the bottom. They will suffer the consequences of these actions as well. So you might think you're penalising the rich, you're actually penalising businesses in hospitality who are already struggling massively. I appreciate that a lot of businesses will be better off under this scheme. But I do believe that the examples I've used, why should they be penalised for this action? We should all be treated equally and pay our fair share. Don't Robin Hood this. I basically just want to indicate that, I mean, our message from a chamber now, we're confused because to our business community, you've sent a message, do not invest in Palmerston North. So our message to them is, do we as the council for the Manawatu, the chamber for the Manawatu, start suggesting that businesses invest in Fielding instead of Palmerston North? Because that's essentially what you're suggesting they consider. We're hugely disappointed by this decision and the underhanded way that it was implemented that afforded no community feedback. On several occasions in the past, we've raised the Manawatu report results that highlighted that the business owners felt council was not listening to them. This takes matters further in the wrong direction. When you give the community options, then go with something else entirely, you give the impression that feedback isn't important. As a voice of the business community, we would like to use today to record and show that we're entirely disappointed with this action, and at this stage we are looking at what we can do to ensure the general public are aware of the actions and implications of this decision. We believe a lot of them don't even realise that what will occur. A vibrant business community is a must for any city that wants to grow and prosper. To penalise investment in our city like this, particularly in the sneaky way that it was done, does not cast this council in good light and certainly does not encourage economic development in our city. I will pass on to Amanda, who has a slightly more positive news to share, but thank you.
I'll be quick because I'm anticipating some questions probably falling out from that. It was mentioned earlier about the consultation over the Te Aroha proposed toll. Of course, we have also had a lot of feedback, generally concerns at the moment, mainly from communities of Woodville. We're going out for feedback from our logistics and transport sectors, who I heard earlier weren't present last night in Woodville, but we are going on that. We do feel, it's really important that we get our regional ring road if we can somehow get some of that financing to do that. There's lots of questions around this still, and it's early days. Feedback doesn't close till the 7th, so we're really trying to get as much feedback so we can give that back to council. I appreciate its feedback through to Akakatahi, but we also know that it's just as important for everybody here, so we will be coming back with that. Business confidence, as most of you will have seen from our reports and from the standard. It was higher than expected. We're really, really pleased for our region that we've got a strong business confidence here at the moment, despite long-term plans, despite budgets. We're still very optimistic towards what the future is, just a little bit of tightening of belt with also respect for those businesses in retail and hospo that we know who are suffering as well. Business awards, fantastic turnout for that. So in terms of entrance, and we're in the judging process now, so thanks everybody who supported that. And city conferences, we're looking as a chamber how we can support the council and how we can get more conferences into the city. Thank you.
Right, are you ready for some questions? You've got a few.
Absolutely.
Okay. I just want to start with a couple, Steve, for you. You've used words like sneaky and underhand, which don't get used very often in the chamber. I just want to unpick those a little bit. So if you could just unbundle that a little bit for us, because we've gone through a consultation process, and yeah, I just want to put those words back at you, and if you could just explain that a little bit more.
Sure. Well, I guess, you know, as I said,
Hold on, your microphone's not working. Can you try it again? No.
move this one. The fact is that you asked for public consultation on rate increases and offer 3 solutions, and then go with a completely different one that actually materially hurts people. But, you know, it's kind of like after consultation, you go with that. And I did say, look, legally, I appreciate you can do that, but if that was the intention at the beginning, it should have been provided as an option so you could actually seek public feedback.
Okay, so it's more about not sharing the final option with the public when we went with the final option.
Absolutely.
And the process around what that actually looked like, because it didn't indicate anywhere that there could be a mix of the 3 options or anything like that in any of it. So it was more the process, and that the determination was pretty much 11th hour, and it came in just as the resolution was about to be made for 50-50, and then it came in as a separate proposal, a resolution to make it 50-50.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to clarify the words that you had used, Steve. Okay, I'll go to Councillor Barrett. Oh, sorry, didn't click over.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks, Steve, and thanks, Amanda, for coming in and sharing the concerns that the business community is feeling. Did just want to pick up a couple questions, Steve, around your commentary. And just to clarify, did I hear correctly that you felt that of the 3 options that were put out there, any 3 of those could have been lived with by the community?
Sorry, I used the calculator and plugged in various properties into them, and they basically, there wasn't a material difference between those 3. So we didn't have any feedback because we didn't see that there was a significant impact on the business community. It looked fair and reasonable.
Great, thank you for clarifying. So even 100% CV would have been a acceptable option from the Chamber's point of view?
From what we looked at, we actually were favouring the hybrid at 70-30 because it was moving it towards the capital, but it still retained that land. We've seen other cities that have gone completely to capital and who are now actually regretting that. So it really, the capital wasn't the preferred option, but the what we're saying to you is really it's the way that it was actually done by putting in something that wasn't on the table to start with that we're really concerned about.
Thank you. And just confirming as well that you're aware that the substantial majority of business premises are better off under the 50-50 system than...
Yes, I mentioned that in my speech.
Great,
I'm one of those tenants.
Great, thank you.
But saying that we also haven't, with regards to the scenarios going forward, we can see that for the first year there's, they could well be better off, but it's on very much a sliding scale, and the determination of that race and how that sliding scale will play out over the next few years, and then at the LTP does give us some concerns.
Great, thanks for that. In terms of your members, you know, and kind of the idea of moving to Fielding, are you aware that Fielding's already on 100% capital value, and do you think your members are aware of that?
No idea.
Madam Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Zabellan.
Ngā mihi, Madam Chair. Morena koroa. He pātai tāku. I've just got some questions. I'm interested in the comments that you made about rating principles sort of penalising, and I just wondered, in your view, how are you balancing, in your view, is council approaching rates in terms of who to penalise and who to incentivise with the rating principle that we roll out?
I guess my main issue is that when you go out and say roughly a 10% increase, why should anyone pay 84% of that increase? Why should they be? Surely there's a mechanism that actually affords that we all pay 11% rather than paying 10 and one pays 84. Yeah, that to me seems unfair.
Okay, cool, thank you. So, are you aware that in the submissions that we received, there was no clear preference from the majority of submissions as to which system to choose, but many in fact did call for a 50-50 split, and were querying why we would choose a 70-30 split?
Well, it surprises me that people proposed a 50-50 when it wasn't one of the options, that we weren't given that option. That's where we lie today. You gave 3 options, you gave a calculator, we actually used it, and took a view that actually we could live with those, but then you went with a different model altogether. I mean, essentially one that actually penalises the wealthy, essentially.
Okay, I'll just leave that there. And I'm just also, are you aware that this was debated in public, that we all put out our reasons for supporting or opposing this? And have you watched that debate to see those reasons?
Yes.
Yes, we have.
And so your view is that's a sneaky approach?
In terms of consultation, yes.
And just in terms of responsiveness to submissions as well, if we're in a position where none of the options that we've put up are obviously preferred by the public, is it your view that we shouldn't be trying to find a solution that fits better than the 3 that haven't been preferred?
Sorry, I'm confused. Are you saying that the public said they didn't like any of those options?
I'm saying none of the 3 options that we went out with were obviously preferred by others, but there was another option suggested. And whether or not, as a decision maker, if the feedback isn't giving you a clear steer, whether or not you just pick the least offensive one, or whether you try and improve on the options.
I guess, I mean, I've always thought through this from the perspective of, I don't have ESP. You give me 3 options and ask me for my opinion. If I don't have an issue with those 3 options, I will be okay with them. What I'm against is that you go materially different way without having consulted people. Maybe 1 or 2 people did say, go this way, but is that actually public consultation? Because you never asked that question in the first place.
Okay, thank you. And just one last one was, you talked about the fair share and then preferring that 70-30 split where we incentivise development to 70% and incentivise fairness at 30%. And what is your view of a fair share across the entire city?
I suggested that just before. Excuse me. I'm a tenant in a commercial property. My increase under the proposed changes is essentially nominal. But I actually would prefer to pay more and not penalise certain people hugely. I would prefer that everyone pays a fair increase in their rates. I don't seek to go and get no rate increase from nominal. Actually, I'm happy to stand up and go, I paid my fair share. But I don't think anyone should be, it should be fair to pay 50 or 80% of the increase, that's all.
Sure, thank you. And so a 50-50 split where you're equally valuing the capital value, the land development aspect, and the and the land use, and then the ability to pay 50/50 doesn't feel fair?
The maths, as I've reflected, we got the data, we've used the calculator subsequently. It isn't fair. It's clearly not fair. And when we bring it to the attention of the wider business community, I'm sure you'll get that feedback too.
Thank you. And how big was your data scope? How many businesses or premises were you looking at when you were doing these calculations?
We used just a nominal, we don't have, we've all got full-time jobs as well. So we just asked for a certain selection.
Sure. Like
Not scientific
10,
at all, really.
20, around 20, we got the data. It was very much picked from around the region. It was looking at different ones. We look at the ones we had a good idea that were going to be penalised, but we also did take other ones that just so that we could benchmark from that. But we know the city. We know what's what here, and we got the information from the horse's mouth, very kindly supplied by the officers with the backing of the CEO to actually get that information, to analyse that information and how we looked at how that data looked. So it wasn't just a pick up random type thing. There was general analysis done on that data that we had.
Thank you very much. Ngā mihi kamara maho. I understand. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Johnson. Sorry.
Kia ora, Madam Chair, and tēnā kōrero. So, he pātai taku. In terms of who you're representing when you come and speak to us, have you done a survey or gathered any formal feedback from your members, or is it more a kind of a more informal sort of feedback that you're giving us?
It depends on what particular topic. With regards to this, we have a very, very strong advisory board and a board which makes up over 25 significant businesses, which, like I mentioned earlier, in terms of sort of the FTA and GDP for our regions, it's very significant. But we also we have a lot of face-to-face contact with our members through all of our events. We get feedback continually from them. We actually feel probably more strong about that sort of a feedback that we get than necessarily from doing surveys. People are very survey weary and to go out and call for information. So we didn't survey on this, but we definitely got very strong feedback from our membership, yes.
Okay, so given that the vast majority of businesses are actually better off under the revised rating system, I'm surprised to hear you come out so strongly against it. Can you justify that?
I think it's what we said before, really. It's the whole principle of going to consultation on one thing and choosing something else. That's probably our biggest concern here, that I have watched the YouTube and the transcripts on that, and it very much felt like an 11th hour decision to change. So that is our concerns. But I think, as Steve said, we're also really concerned about that inward investment and what we're signalling as a city to businesses coming here, and people who want to or might be considering upgrading their businesses, adding more hotel rooms, etc., etc. It's those signals that we're really concerned about at that capital level.
So, but we consulted on a full 100% capital value, didn't we?
Yes, they did. They consulted on 3 things, yes, but you chose a 4th.
So the one that we chose lay between 2 of the options that we had put forward. So I'm struggling to understand your characterisation of that as a totally different 4th option. Is it not a compromise position between 2 options that were put forward?
I guess if you use the calculator, it does have a material impact dollar-wise. None of those 3 previous options had that material increase. So either the calculator was wrong or the change worked against it.
Well, a full capital value would have resulted in a much more significant increase, wouldn't it?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm struggling to understand your objection.
The objection is that you chose an option that wasn't consulted on.
Okay, I'll just leave it there because I'm not getting any sense. Thank you.
Thank you. The only other thing I wanted to ask was, are you going to put a submission in to NZTA about the toll?
Absolutely, and we're encouraging, we're calling for feedback so we can get the feedback from the membership. That will be done through survey and through sending the link, but we'll also ask people to put in their own submissions as well, because it is significant for our region, of course. So, yeah, absolutely.
Okay, thank you. There's no further questions, so thank you very much for coming in to present today. And I will look, thank you very much, and I will look to move that the Economic Growth Committee receive the presentation for information, seconded by
Thank you.
Councillor Wood. I'd just like to say, I know that parts of that were controversial, but sometimes we have to hear things that we don't want to hear. And I think that was one of those things. Sometimes some of our groups want to come in and say things to us that sometimes we don't want to hear. And we didn't consult on that fourth option, and they're telling us that we didn't consult on it, and that's what they were telling us. And they're our business community. They represent our business community, and that's what they were telling us. So that's the voice of our business community. I've opened it up. The Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just acknowledge the Chamber. Thank you. I'll start with the positives. Great to hear that the business confidence is there, and we're slightly bucking the trend. I was at an early meeting this morning at 7 a.m. and good to see George Street alive with hockey players and all sorts of other business people around. And you just feel, and some of the data is telling it's not good news, and we know that because it has been difficult. So there is a slight sort of rebound, so that's good to hear. Also that the business awards are fully subscribed, and look forward to that as well. Could I just say, look, democracy's democracy. We made a decision. I'm going to move on from that. But I would have to say, unforeseen consequences, colleagues. We made a decision, and I go with the majority decision. Obviously, I was in the minority about unforeseen consequences, and we're just hearing a little bit of that. Could I just say, I've had through my office the 80%ers that have come in, and I know there'll be pushback on my comments that, 68% of the business community, or whatever it is, are looking like they're doing okay. But it's the big end of town that actually really fronts the investment in our city. The foodstuffs, the Woolworths, the Higgins, the ADA, New Zealand Defence Force businesses, and then the medium-sized businesses, the Seed Spiders, the Green Tech Robotics, the Stallions, the E-Techs, who have all had significant increases. They are the people that actually drive our jobs, our economy, and they have been penalised. But I'll leave it at that because it's gone, it's done, and I just, I accept the decision we made. But I just would say there are unforeseen consequences. Thank you.
Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I must say, I'm starting to wonder who the Chamber represents, because it was very clear to us that the majority of businesses will be better off with the proposal that was put forward for rates. So I find it very strange to have this presentation now, which is so negative and yet isn't representing the majority of businesses. So I'm struggling with that. I'm also struggling at the characterisation of the decision-making of councillors sneaky and underhand. I think those words are inaccurate. And I also think that it's counterproductive to come in after the decision has been made and start throwing insults around. It doesn't do much to enhance the relationship between the Chamber and Council. I also struggle with the characterisation of rates as a penalty, as some kind of way of penalising people. Rates are a tax that we all pay for services that we all receive. However it's determined that taxes are applied, someone will be unhappy. It's also, again, I really struggle to see how an objection can be made to an option that is actually a compromise option between 100% capital value, which would have been much more of a heavy burden for many businesses, and 70-30. So I'm really struggling with the interpretation of the decision making, with the interpretation of the consultation, and with the characterisation of some of our actions. And I have to say it's a disappointing presentation from the Chamber.
Thank you, Councillor. Just to reiterate what the Mayor has said, the Chamber does do a fantastic job and the business community do really appreciate what you do. So thank you very much for coming in today. Thank you. We'll look to vote. It is passed with 14 votes for and 1 against. You're going to put the votes up. Thank you. We'll now move on to the bid presentation with Matthew and with Rob Campbell and Amanda.
Morena.
Morning.
Madam Chair, thank you for the opportunity to present again. I want to start with an apology. I think you've asked us to freshen it up a little bit and perhaps have a few more of our committee come to these events. Unfortunately, our committee are highly valued, committed and engaged, but they are also very busy people. They send their apologies. No offence is intended by their non-attendance. I'm afraid you're stuck with the old and the tired and also Matthew. So let's we'll kick through. Can you flick? So just to recap, it is a membership organisation funded by a targeted rate on property. We have more than 1,200 property and business owners in the city centre, bounded by the Ring Road. We're a vehicle to translate community aspirations into action and a conduit for communication between yourselves and the community. Key deliverables, we're advocating for business interests within the bid boundary and provide representation for them. We're charged and we accept our role to grow the city centre through collaboration, marketing, events and public relations. We're also, a big part of our remit is to support community members to achieve their goals in a safe and supportive environment. I want to talk a little bit about the year in review, and this is just a reflection on my part. We have been certainly at an economic low ebb. Persistent inflation over the last 2 to 3 years, and then rising interest rates have really hurt consumer sentiment, and that in turn has hurt a lot of our members who are predominantly sort of hospo and retail, smaller businesses. I've heard some feedback that generally business is in good heart, and I think that's probably true, but our membership are still concerned, pensive, a little bit diffident, a little bit concerned about the future. There's certainly a different feeling in our catchment generally. And so that's led to business confidence being, as I say, a little bit at a low ebb. And that's reflected, I think, in the community sentiment that we're seeing. We've surveyed the community regularly in the last 12 months, and while we've had overall positive responses in terms of what bid is providing and the services we're engaging with our community, levels of participation, levels of engagement have been lower than I would like. And I think that's about our community being a little bit distracted about what's going on around them. Looking forward, we have some challenges, I think, in the next 12 months, and we're refocusing. Bid has not been immune to the impacts of rising costs. We set our targeted rate 3 years ago, and we haven't increased it during that time. We don't propose to increase it in the next year, at least anyway, where we feel that we're able to serve our community and cut a cloth rather than try and impact them with increased costs there. We do want to increase participation though. I don't think we're engaging our community enough. We're not allowing them the opportunity to engage with themselves, and that'll be a key focus for us in the new year. We will also be looking at our operational rhythm to make sure that we're taking the opportunity to engage and using our resources as wisely as we can for maximum effect. As a consequence of sort of our stretched resources, we're now looking in terms of our events to make them more consequential. So we'll be pouring our resources into probably less events, but events that are more likely to generate vibrancy and vitality in the city centre. And lastly, we'll have a goal in the year ahead to really focus on getting our community talking to themselves, sharing their problems, and hopefully finding solutions between them. I'll pass on to Matthew to let you know what he's been up to on an operational basis.
Thanks, Rob. Morena, thank you everybody for the opportunity to provide an update. I'll stick to the key points on this. The past year has really been a focus of building some momentum. We've done a whole lot around advocacy, and that surrounds crime, youth crime, homelessness, and the effects of mental health on traders in the city and also visitors to the city as well. We've had some positive cut through there through the Safety Advisory Board and also collaboration through some of the elected members here today as well, which has got some positive outcomes, created a bit of connectivity between traders, council and also landlords as well and police. Other things that we've done, obviously we have a voice of consultation and representation of advocacy through sitting on a number of steering groups as well. The Civic and Cultural Precinct Plan, also the City Centre Bus Terminal as well, and we've had a hand in guiding some of the ideas for the previous Build Palmy Forum on the earthquake-prone buildings as well. Other things that we've done throughout the year as well is we've built a new website and a city centre events calendar. That's up and running now, and we have re-sculpted our comms strategy along with developing an internal events and promotions calendar as well. And also we've created May Music Month as well, which was a success. That brought a lot of people into the city centre across different venues. We've done a debrief on that now. There's more to come from that. We will make that an annual event and build upon that. And our events now moving forward are about what brings value to the bid members and the wider community as well, what brings people into the city centre and what gets people stimulating spend in the city centre as well. So moving forward, our current focus is over the next couple of months, you've got a lovely poster in front of you. Our next event is the Taste of Spring event, and that's a collaboration with IPU, Youth Space and Alexander's Patisserie. That's about celebrating the emergence of spring and connecting a cultural community into the city centre. That's a free public event in Cornwall Mall next Sunday. It'd be great to see some of you there. Following on from that, we also are involved in the Dragfest window promo at the moment. That as Dragfest builds, that's a successful template that's been replicated from the successful midwinter Christmas promo where 50 retailers were on board. This one's a little bit more conservative, but it's the biggest Dragfest show in the country and we have to give it some support for all the right reasons. We've also, from a member's perspective, the effects of business, we're running a retail crime prevention workshop on the 14th of October. We expect a pretty good turnout for that. Disappointingly, the city has some of the highest amounts of retail crime per head per capita in New Zealand, so we're opening up a bit of public debate. The Honourable Paul Goldsmith, Justice Minister, will feature in that, as will police and corrections, and hopefully Retail New Zealand, just waiting on a confirmation of that. So that's to come. That will give members a safe space to have a chat, connect, and understand where things are happening in that space. Yeah. Other events, 24 Days of Christmas promo. the Christmas night market on the 14th of December, and promotion of bid members as well. And obviously it's focusing on vibrancy. We're developing some commercial scooter art tours in partnership with Flamingo and Eyesight and the PNCC Marcoms team. That will be the first official scooter street art tour in New Zealand. And we're also in discussion with the Sculpture Trust to develop some city 1 hour walking sculpture tours as well, also with the Eyesight PNCC Marcoms team. Moving on, we're focusing on increasing member engagement. We're redeveloping our comms strategy from what was initially developed last year to create more reach and engagement with members from currently 50% up to 75%, and through our Facebook page, EDM, and paid ads, with more of a presence from my perspective and a narrative. And moving forward, we're looking at setting weekly Meet the GM meetings. We'll rotate around different cafes in town. There'll be 20 minutes appointments. It's an opportunity for members to engage and for us to support them. We've just done our community satisfaction survey, and then AGM 27th of November. And then moving forward, our advocacy focus is safety and security, city centre parking, the city centre bus terminal, civic and cultural precinct plan, earthquake-prone building strategy, use of public spaces and signs, and the use of public spaces bylaw, and also dangerous, affected and insanitary buildings.
Thank you. Apologies to those who might have struggled to read some of that.
How to not do slides.
I'll open up to some questions. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. I just want to ask one question, Matthew. If you could achieve one thing on that big list, what would it be?
Getting businesses to grow.
Is that the bid's job to do that?
It's part of our job. It's part of our job to empower businesses to do that and be connected. And I suppose safety and security and the marketing of the city centre is also important. It's all interconnected.
Okay. You had one on there about a workshop for retail crime. How many will you expect to get? How many retailers will you expect to get to that?
I expect a pretty good turnout. We're also going to share it through the chamber as well, because it's not just a city centre problem, it's a whole city issue.
How many were at the last one?
There was 60 registrations, I think about 32 turned up.
Yeah.
I would expect we'll get an increased turnout for this because we're doing this before Christmas hits, which is a pain point for retail crime and theft. So I'd hope we get between 100 to 130.
So what's the takeaway from the workshop?
It's some open discussion, but it's also some tools and resources to take away to help them have preventative measures in their businesses.
Okay, thank you. We've got a few questions. Councillor Bowen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Morena. I think I ask this most times, but I'm interested in how you're tracking on engaging with your membership. So you talk about the 1,200 members or ratepayers, I suppose, who contribute to the bid, and one of your aspirations is to increase that engagement. So what things like your survey that you've just done, what kind of reach are you seeing into those 1,200
To be fair, survey responses have been pretty low. We're engaged currently through EDM as well for surveys and things like that with about 50% of the bid members. It's our open rates range between 33 to 61% depending on what the topic is basically. But the results we've had back, although relatively low, have been positive. They've been 70% on satisfied.
Good.
Councillor, a key focus for us in the year ahead is to raise that level of engagement, not just with us, but between the members of the community themselves. So a work in progress, a work to do, definitely.
Okay. And then I had a question. You mentioned in your presentation about refocusing your events offering. What criteria you're bringing to that refocusing?
Well, we're going to restrict our events to more consequential events, probably targeting attendance of minimum 1,000 people in the city centre, and probably restricting that to at least one a month, maybe even less than that. So less events, more consequential, more vitality. That's the aim. Events can be quite draining in terms of resources, you know, and we have a need to be responsible with the limited funds we've got.
Absolutely. So what, I'm imagining that you have established some success measures you're looking for out of that. Have you consulted with the community on what the success of those events looks like?
We certainly have hurdle rates in terms of anticipated participation, and that feeds through to likely ongoing spend following people coming to the city centre. As a committee that's representative of the community, we have sort of settled on those numbers. We do regularly engage with our community about the events that have been held and take their feedback, absolutely.
Great. Thank you. Madam Chair.
Councillor Hancock.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Thanks, Rob and Matthew. Just a quick question, just in terms of city safety, and you've got the retail crime workshop coming up. Yesterday, I think it was Deputy Mayor Auckland, Viv Beck, spoke about some successes they're having in Auckland around reduction in violence and managing of homelessness. Obviously, these are issues which we have similar issues here in Palmerston North.
Question?
Have you, yeah. Is there an opportunity for the bid to actually connect with Auckland to see what they're actually doing there and perhaps get some learnings?
Absolutely, yeah. I think it's always good to look at other regions and the challenges that they face and how they deal with them and what positive outcomes are. And that's something for discussion also with the Safety Advisory Board and members as well.
Yep, thank you.
BIDS met as a group, and Matthew attended a recent conference across on the Hawke's Bay. So we do connect, and we can certainly look at that, absolutely.
Great, thank you, Rob. Madam Chair.
Councillor Arnott.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you to both, Amanda. Fantastic promotions. Is there going to be an eating competition attached to this one?
You can purchase a Taste of Spring patisserie from Alexander's Patisserie and go in the draw to win a private performance by Kodama, the drum
I
team.
haven't done very well so far, but time will tell. Thank you.
I've heard you. So.
Great question. Right, Councillor Barrett.
Thank you. A few questions. Thank you both for coming in and presenting, and good to see you again. And no doubt in the future we will see you and friends, and we look forward to that as well. Just wanted to clarify. So in terms of your resourcing at this point, it's all rates funded through the special rate.
Correct. Yes, so we do manage the Safe City Host contract as well, which is funded through the grant program of the council.
Okay.
But otherwise, we are fully funded by the targeted rate. Yes.
Yeah.
We may, as time progresses, look for alternative sources of funding, but at this stage, we're cutting our cloth.
Yeah, no, understood. This might be for officers then, Madam Chair. Just given that it is funded through a targeted rate, do we as council, because it's kind of our law that's being used to fund their work, do we as council end up with any influence or control over what Palmy Bid does, or is it simply hands-off money?
I'll ask the General Manager to answer that question.
Morena koutou, through you, Madam Chair. Look, to date, given I think we're into year 4 of the Palmy Bid, the approach has been to be relatively hands-off because it reflects the way in which business improvement districts operate, which is the owners and operators voted to choose a rate and then pass that back to themselves to make decisions. So to an extent, Rob and his board are directly accountable to the activities of BID. I appreciate that the council is the conduit, I guess, for passing over that rate. The contract that we have with Palmy Bid does provide the opportunity for the council to request more formal reporting. So to date, it's been informal reporting through presentations such as today. If the council wanted to take a more slightly heavy-handed or more governance oversight role, then it can, through the contract, request more formal reporting, which would be the sorts of things you'd see similar to a CCO, which is, what are your objectives, how are you performing, and then an officer response to that. So that is an option within the contract, but to date, given that it's still relatively early days in the life of Palmy Bid, we've wanted to, the officer approach has been to take a relatively light touch and let them grow.
If I can just clarify, we do formally, we do report sort of each January following our AGM. There's a report that I attach, and we produce AGM financial accounts as well as a business plan. So there is a measure of reporting of what's going on. Yeah.
Great, thank you. If I could just follow up through Madam Chair to the General Manager for Strategic Planning. So is that accountability limited to reporting back, or could it include direction setting?
I'd have to go back and check the policy and the contract, but it certainly definitely allows for reporting back. And look, I think, yeah, we could take that on notice and come back to you on that point.
Great, thank you. Just a couple of specific questions. Quite a long list of advocacy activities there. To my read of those, they seem to be kind of responding to kind of what was coming out of the council machine. And I just wondered, is there a conversation within Palmy Bid around the kind of balance of advocacy effort between kind of proactive, trying to get things on the agenda, versus reactive kind of stuff that's already coming out of the system?
I mean, it's reactive in the sense that we, our ability to influence what's happening is dictated by council's agenda primarily. But we do take feedback from our community, and we do advocate for issues that they have uppermost in their minds. It's not just one-way traffic.
Rob, you need to speak into your microphone.
Sorry, it just so happens that at the moment, the issues that the community have been concerned about have been primarily what's been on the council's agenda. Yeah.
Great, thank you. I saw that city centre living wasn't on the advocacy list. Is that because your view is that it's not on council's agenda, or that it's not a priority for Palmy Bid?
No, and we do have a desire to increase city centre living. We'd ideally love another 1,000 to 2,000 people residing in the city, and we are actively engaging with council officers at the moment to assist council's planning for that. It does seem that council's focus on that particular area is quite distant. Yep.
Thank you for those reflections. And finally, you had indicated an event with a government minister invited, I think is that the same as that workshop event, or is that something else again?
Yeah, that's a retail crime prevention workshop.
Yeah, cool, thank you. And is that kind of an exclusive where kind of some of our elected representatives come and others don't, or like is there kind of a broader invite?
We'd like to extend an invitation to all elected members to be present at that.
I was thinking in terms of parliamentary representatives. Has that gone more broadly than individual
yes, an
parties?
invitation's gone out to all the other parties. It is a sitting week. So I know Tangi's not available, and I know David Hockard's not available, but they're looking to send representatives. Right. So
cool. No, thanks for that clarification, Madam Chair.
If I could just sort of add that event we are looking to live stream, so that should increase participation next time around. Could I possibly ask a question? Council, when you talk about directing, what exactly did you have in mind? How would you like it to direct the bid?
I'd be happy to entertain a brief answer.
Yeah, sure.
Great. Probably some of that does stem back to the submission to the long-term plan that was made, calling for a greater use of surveillance in the city centre and using some, AI approaches to that, etc. And I think that might be a case where the community-wide interest could well interface with Palmy Bid's interest in a way that could suggest some direction setting happen in some way. Now, whether that would happen through the contract, through a bylaw, through etc., I don't know. But that was kind of a prompt for me to think about to what extent is Palmy Bid charting its own course, and to what extent is the wider community being involved in that discussion.
I think when you talk about AI, there's a difference between public and private premises and what the law currently dictates. So publicly, legally, you can't utilise facial recognition technology. In the presentation I gave in the long-term plan submission, really the AI is about predicting behaviours and movements or that identify certain types of crime rather than facial recognition technology.
I think we'll leave that there. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we'll get really off track if we go down that track. Anyway, Councillor Zabellan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Tēnā koroa. He pātai iti taku, just a really quick question is touching on the scooter and sculpture tours that you mentioned, and whether or not there's an intention to charge for those, and whether that could potentially be a diverse income avenue for you.
Not so much an income avenue for us, but yes, there is an intent to charge. Naturally, the Sculpture Trust would receive payment out of that. The eyesight would get a 10% commission, and we'd get a very small amount in the administration fee for marketing, promotion, those sorts of things. And that's the same with the scooter tours as well.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful. Thanks, Madam Chair.
Thank you. That's all the questions that we've got for you. Thank you very much. I'd like to move that the Economic Growth Committee receive the presentation for information, moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Wood. Just going into comment, I'll just do mine first and then we'll go to Councillor Bowen. I just want to say that the BID do a lot of work for the money that they do receive, and they do it within budget. So the work that they do, a lot of it is unseen, but they are going into areas that council don't get time to do. So I do want to thank them for the work that they do. It's really appreciated, and we do thank them for the work that they do in this space. So thank you very much for what you do, it's particularly going into that safety area. I think that's an area that retailers are appreciating. I will now move to Councillor Bowen.
Kia ora, Madam Chair, thank you. And yeah, absolutely agree with your comments about the value the BID are providing to the city. And I make no apology for continuing to ask about your engagement and reach into that membership, because I think that's how we'll set the BID up for future success, is to see the people who pay for the BID services really feeling the value of what you offer. So I will continue to ask about that, and I'll expect to see positive progress in that regard. I think there's some really good repositioning gone on this year, particularly in, as was described, that assessment of the effectiveness and the impact of the events that you're offering. I think having a clear target for what success looks like will not just enable successful events, but enables you to communicate the success of those events to the people who are paying for them. And again, that feeds into what I think is the value proposition of the BID. We have to be able to tell the story of what you're achieving and how you're achieving it. And I think we're all here to support you to do that. And then it would be remiss of me, I think, as we move to Culture and Sport Committee next week, not to mention how delighted I am to see the strong support for economic development that comes from our arts and culture sector, noticing the success of the Music Month activations and the link between performances in our local hospitality scene, the support that Palmy Bid is offering to major events, such as National Young Performers. And the Mayor and I met with their team recently, and they were pleased to talk to us about the work that they're doing with you in connecting our out-of-town visitors with the local businesses that can support that event, as well as the work that Palmy Bid is doing with Dragfest to highlight to local retailers that opportunity for them. And then the sculpture and art tours that Councillor Zabellin referenced as well there. These things are not white elephants or fantasies, they're strong economic development support mechanisms, and I'm delighted to see that reflected in this committee today, Madam Chair.
Thank you. The Mayor.
Kia ora, thanks, Madam Chair. Look, sometimes you get judged by your city centre, by your, by the visitors that come to our city and by our own residents. But I'd have to say, when you spoke about business confidence, you're really talking about the retail, the hospo, some service industries, and they've been massively hit in other cities and other areas. You just need to pick up newspapers in other cities or see the mainstream news or look at social media to understand how damn tough it is out there. And I'd have to say we're bucking the trend a little bit. Certainly, I think the events have really fueled us during the quieter winter months. I had the privilege of going around with the bid and one of our GMs around the midwinter window competition. And you've got to do those sorts of things to keep the things alive. There was chats with all the retailers. It was good. We spent a morning there and got the vibe of what was going on in town. There's been some other reach around the CCTV cameras within the city, and I think there's a lot of work to do in that space, but we're sort of restarting there, remembering that this city was the first in New Zealand to have that sort of set up. Things around retail crime, I mean, it's real. Those that have ever owned a business will know how tough that is. And just with police apprehending 5 offenders with nearly $10,000 worth of retail goods that was stolen from 3 or 4 stores is evidence that it absolutely does happen. But I think it's the marketing of events, and I love the term conservative drag fest. I don't know how you can get a conservative drag fest, but well done, Matthew. I think that's a new term. But look, it's those interactions with events. I think that's where the bid can really add some more value, and I know you're trying in that space. Also, perhaps encouraging our building owners, and Matthew and I have talked about this, and others, about trying to get some of our building owners to improve the look and the presentation of their buildings. And if we can start on that with the Coalition of the Willing and council, maybe some sponsors, get in and start to do this. This is how Main Streets have really done their work really well. And, painting up their buildings. So I encourage elected members. I'm not with some of my colleagues around direction. I think this is something that the sector needs to set their own direction. Of course, they're going to look at where council are doing things and try and meet our aspirations as well, because we're meant to be all working in the same direction. But I would be loath to put council resolutions on the table, "Thy shall do that." Otherwise, we might as well just run it ourselves. So keep up the great work. It's a work in progress. You've started really well. Keep up. Yep, thank you.
Councillor Arnott.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think your direction should come from your members, from the business community, and thank you for working so hard on their behalf. Crime, everyone's got it. Thank you for drawing light on it, and I hope quite a few councillors go to the prevention evening and show their support. All this talk of AI and all the scariness about it, it's only been around for 70 plus years, since the 1950s. I don't think it's anything to be scared of. I think it's another tool to be used. I think it's important. I think you guys do some great promotions, and I've enjoyed supporting them. I hope there's many more hot dog eating and hot cross bun eating competitions I can attend, and You know, it all adds to the vibrance of the city. So, you know, I think BID do a fantastic job, as do the Chamber, and thank you for coming in and voicing your views, the views of your community, and I think that's very important. Thank you.
Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks to the BID for the opportunity to hear from them today and understand what's on their mind and how they're pursuing their work. I just wanted to clarify a little bit, given that there's been some suggestions, perhaps interpreting some of my questions beyond certainly the scope that I was intending. So just to be clear with the Chamber where I'm at on this, I think it's quite useful that we do have these informal mechanisms. I'd be watching with interest as we continue to see the informal report backs, and I'd probably have some appetite at this point for considering whether there might be a little bit more structured approach so that we've got a good sense of where things are going in the future. In terms of direction setting, my reason for asking that question is I think it's important that we know as a council whether or not there's a backstop and what those backstops are. And we would each obviously have a different point in terms of where we might think that those backstops need to be activated and particular issues that we might want to consider in that regard. I'm nowhere near wanting to do that. Around Palmy Bid, I think it does need to chart its own course, and hopefully we can see it succeeding well in terms of its ambitions for the heart of the city and the vibrancy in it. So thank you.
And the Deputy Mayor that keeps coming in and out.
Only once, Madam Chair. Tēnā koutou, nei rā taku mihi matakui kui ki a koutou. I just want to comment as someone who works with young children, and, well, not so young, they're secondary school age, but the feedback I've had from the students that I work with is that they're really grateful for the fact that there are regular events happening within our city, and that makes it more vibrant. I'm also grateful for the connectedness with Palmy Bid and the educational sector. You know, they're young people. I know I can see Sean over there, but he has come in regularly into school and bringing resources and making that connection and letting people know. And Palmy Bid, thank you for all the wonderful things that you do and have planned, because certainly a whole range of people, young and old, appreciate the things that you're doing. So, ngā mihi nui ki a koutou. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. That's all the comment we've got, so we'll look to vote now. Thank you. That's passed with 14 votes for and none against. Right, we're just going to move the minutes on page 11, and then we might look to see if we can turn the heating up, and then, because we're all a bit cold, and then we'll go to morning tea. So page 11, I'll look to move the minutes, seconded by Councillor Wood. I don't think anybody's got anything they want to bring up on the minutes. No, so we'll look to vote on the minutes, please. We're voting on the minutes, Vaughan, on page 11, if you want to put your vote in. Okay, that's passed. 13 votes for and 1 abstention. Okay, we are done, and we now go to morning tea. We'll be back at 10 to 11 for the good vote. Right? And we're going to hopefully have the heating up. Thank you all. Tēnā koutou, welcome back, and we'd like to go to page 19 and welcome James and David to the table to talk to this item. So just to clarify, everyone, they're talking to this paper first, and then we will have the notice of motion after this, just so that everyone's quite clear on the order. So, thank you.
Morena i te whānau, ko David Murphy tōku ingoa, James McGill, Senior Planner with me. Obviously, we'll take the paper as read. Just a couple of sort of short introductory comments. I mean, I think there's been a short time to respond to the toll proposal and the notice of motion. So I guess I'd like to clarify that the officer advice is not a full technical assessment of the toll proposal. One of the reasons it isn't that is that there's actually limited information available, technical information on the tolling proposal at the moment. So as we said in the paper, we have requested from Waka Kotahi a full copy of the tolling assessment, and that's yet to be provided. We have, in the last day or two, received a request from Waka Kotahi to provide the city's transport model to assist with ongoing tolling analysis in the region. So that suggests that there is ongoing analysis occurring in relation to the toll proposal. As officers, we accept there are a range of views. A few of those that we're able to canvass quickly were touched in the memo, and James will touch briefly on some others that we've been able to speak to. Except that there are commuters and residents expressing views in terms of and the forums that are available to them allowing that voice to come through. In terms of the freight users that we've spoken to, they tend to take a more national view, so their response is probably more pitched in relation to their overall their overall view on tolls as opposed to their specific view on this particular toll. It has been mentioned subsequent to this report in a range of forums that it is a replacement road, and I think that's a relevant consideration. On one hand, I think that sort of, there's an argument that you could say it shouldn't be tolled for that, but on the other hand, if we're looking in terms of how we best advocate to get something out of this, then the fact that it's a replacement road strengthens the case if we are to try and seek some of that new revenue to be redirected to other transport needs in the region, which is part of the recommendation in the officer advice. The officer advice in the recommendation references that those funds should be redirected to the regional Manawatu Regional Freight Ring Road, and if that isn't achieved or able to be achieved, then the position should be opposition, so it's sort of conditional support. I'd just like to emphasise that the Manawatu Regional Freight Ring Road is a regional or central North Island project. Again, there's been some commentary that it's about redirecting funds from a toll for Te Ahuaturanga to a Palmerston North project. The Manawatu Regional Freight Ring Road would serve inter-regional freight movements, be hugely beneficial to Te Utanganui, where we're seeing freight move across the country. So Te Utanganui and the Manawatu Regional Freight Ring Road are central North Island projects. They happen to be in Palmerston North. Obviously the freight is distributed across the country. One last consideration again, and it's not in the paper, but I think the government have talked about regional deals. In talking about regional deals, they've said that there's no new money. However, the toll is in effect new money. So if the council were of a mind to think about the conditional support type of submission, it could potentially add to that redirecting the funding from the toll to regional projects such as the Manawatu Regional Freight Ring Road could be part of a regional deal, given that they've said that there's no new money. However, the toll is new money since the NLTP was allocated. So, so that's just some introductory comments. With James, you want to provide a brief update just on any other key stakeholders that we've engaged with since the paper was finished?
Morning.
everyone. Ahead of this paper and ahead of the consultation, when it was first signalled, we did reach out to our freight industry representatives that we do have contact with, as well as AA, to get a sense of their understanding. So, as David mentioned, the freight industry advice that was, or direction that was given was kind of based on a bit more of a national view, and it was generally a bit more supportive of tolls. They recognise that there's, I guess, funding shortfalls within the transport sector and the desire to build out the transport network and recognise it as a potential revenue source for investment. So one of the commentary that did come from the Heavy Haulage Association is they would like, similar to our comments, see that money reinvested back into the region. They noted their support for Manuka Regional Freight Ring Road, but limitations about their ability to access it because of some under-spec bridge, so underweight or undersize, and generally like to see those invested in as part of any potential toll revenue. We also heard from AA just this morning, they don't have a finalised position yet. There's still some confirmation that needs to occur in a national direction. But there is a range of views within AA. So they had a local meeting. I understand that there were members who were fully in supportive and that there were those that were fully opposed. One of the comments that was made was that in Tauranga, where they already have tolls, that there was generally more support. There was a bit of a recognition from members in the Tauranga area that there was benefits to having the tolling, and so there was an indication that they were a bit more supportive in that national space. So that's the extent of the information we've been able to get from various organisations. I will comment in terms of our officers' advice that the Manuka Regional Freight Ring Road does share the same activity class as what any potential tolling revenue would be received go towards. So that's why that recommendation was made based on that, because it matched the activity class and more likely to get the funding. There's no reason why, if we wanted to look elsewhere and expand and think about, upkeep of the Saddle Road, that you couldn't petition for that as part of it. But our main direction was around that Manuka Regional Freight Ring Road and the activity class matching. Thank you.
Thank you. You happy to take questions? Okay,
Yes.
I was going to start with one from myself. David, you talked about we didn't have a toll assessment. What would a toll assessment, how would that inform us if we were to have the toll assessment from Waka Kotahi?
I don't confess to be a tolling expert. However, I anticipate that would look at things such as effectively the justification for the toll and the quantum of the toll, and I guess, potentially what are the costs of paying the toll versus the equivalent costs of travelling through the Pahiatua track or the Saddle Road on a, depending on which sort of vehicle you're using, those sorts of things. So it appears that there is, ongoing tolling analysis occurring from Waka Kotahi.
So do you know the reason why they haven't given it to us?
Yeah, no, I can't answer that question.
Okay. And in one of the recommendations, which is A, it's the proposed toll rates, you want to have it consistent with other tolls around New Zealand, James. What is that recommendation referring to?
There's a couple elements to that. So the first is a recognition that it is a lot higher than what is currently being used in Auckland Tauranga, and that does have a big impact on people's decision and their ability to pay for those. So that, from an operational perspective, that would impact what's called the diversion rate. So how many vehicles would divert to use Saddle Road or Pahiatua as a result. So the logic behind that is at a lower tolling rate, you would have less people diverting to Saddle Road and Pahiatua track.
So would you say it's $2, or are you going to put a figure on it?
I won't put a figure on it. It'd be helpful to get the tolling assessment to see kind of what rates were measured, But talking with AA, I know that they kind of indicated they would like to see it more, if it was to go ahead, more consistent with, I guess, at a national direction, Auckland and Tauranga in comparison.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Tēnā kōrua. First question in 2.3, you've alluded to increased operational costs for us, but there's no figure on that. Are you able to give us any kind of a figure about council's increased operational costs?
Short answer is no. And as I said, this officer of advice doesn't. We're certainly not presenting it as a full technical assessment of the pros and cons of a toll, because that information isn't available to assess. So ultimately, as James pointed out, if a toll is applied and the rate of the toll, whatever that is, will impact the number of vehicles that choose to use Pahiatua track or the saddle road. So the answer to that would be informed by the result of whether there is a toll and what the quantum of it is. But again, it's hard to assess how people will respond based on price with the information that we have as well.
Okay. However, we would be responsible for part of the Pahiatua track and the roading in Ashurst, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Do we have any figures for what we've spent on the track in the past before NZTA took it over?
Just looking at my infrastructure colleagues, no.
Okay. Well, let's move on to another area. What risks do you see for council in us were we to agree to your alternative resolutions?
I don't see any significant risks relative to the notice of motion, because the way in which the recommendations are phrased is that if the government is not willing to redirect the revenue to the Manawatu Regional Freight Ring Road and make the toll more comparable, then the submission is in opposition. So, in effect, if a toll is going to be applied, the officer advice is an advocate, is positioning the council to try and get something out of this as best as possible.
Would you think there would be any reputational risk to us as a council?
I think there could be reputational risks in terms of our relationship with government if we were to just straight out oppose the toll, and that I guess the government have signalled that that's a policy tool they want to use to fund new roads. If we want to continue to maintain a relationship with the government, talk about regional deals, then the recommendations have been cast in a way which I think is trying to take a pragmatic approach of how can we actually get some benefit from the toll that's proposed.
Is it a new road though?
It's a replacement new road.
Okay. Do you think that putting forward a kind of what in my part of the world we would describe as a bob each way type submission? You knew that was coming, didn't you, Councillor Bowen? So in other words, hedging our bets, saying, well, if there's a toll, we want a piece of it, but if we don't get any, we don't want a toll. Do you not think that weakens the argument?
Yeah, look, I think council make a number of decisions around this table. Some are informed by policy, legislation, technical evidence. The decision that the council is going to make on this is very much at the political end of the spectrum. The officer advice, I think, should be viewed as an alternative negotiating position with the government. So this is, if a toll is going to be applied, how are we going to be able to get traction to advance a project that's been talked about for decades that has had no response from government?
I will save the rest for comment, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Bowen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Tēnā kōrua. I do want to go back, to this new versus replacement conversation. Are there any definitions about what is a new road versus what is a replacement road?
Not that I'm aware of. I mean, it has similarities to some of the conversations we have in the LTP when we've got a renewal that increases the level of service. So maybe that's good justification by description of a new replacement road. It is a replacement road, but it provides a much higher level of service than what we had through the Manawatu Gorge.
Okay. In 2.2, there's a mention a toll was not part of the initial planning and consultation. Was a toll mentioned at all in the initial planning and consultation? I couldn't find anything on the website.
Yeah, I was involved in most of well, not most, a lot of the processes associated with the replacement road, the notice of requirement, the multi-criteria assessment. I don't recall the toll being proposed, but the paper does outline that, you know, tolls and a greater use of user pays has been a key pillar of this government's policy regarding transport funding.
Yeah, the very recent change to the policy. So on that, on the Manawatu Regional Freight Ring Road, under the new policy, we're in all likelihood looking at that being told anyway as a actual new road. I'm going to call them actual new roads now to differentiate from replacement new roads.
Yeah, and that's an interesting question because I think we know there's a proposal to toll O2NL as well and a proposal to toll Te Ahua-Turanga. I think if both of those were tolled, the ability to, I mean, the case for tolling, and again, I don't profess to be a tolling expert, but the case for tolling the Manawatu Regional Freight Ring Road probably is impacted. So again, if we're trying to leverage something out of the situation that's been put in front of us, if O2NL is going to be tolled and Te Ahua-Turanga is going to be tolled, then how do we extract revenue from that to advance the Manawatu Regional Freight Ring Road? The Manawatu Regional Freight Ring Road, I think, will always be more difficult to toll than Te Ahua-Turanga and O2NL because there's multiple access points. You know, if you put a bridge at Longburn, access off 57, you can still use 56, which is a similar level of service. So, you know, if Te Ahua-Turanga ultimately wasn't tolled, then maybe tolling the Manawatu Regional Freight Ring Road is a potential outcome. But I think it's a more likely scenario is Te Ahua-Turanga is tolled, not the Manawatu Regional Freight Ring Road, in which case we have to extract as much funding as we can from the toll for Te Ahua-Turanga to help advance the ring road. Long answer, but...
No, interesting answer. Thank you, David. I think, I suppose my concern here, and I'll be interested in your view, is that if the toll goes ahead on Te Ahua-Turanga, and that's an easy toll because it's point to point, when we go and continue our conversations about the Regional Freight Ring Road, if that becomes a difficult tolling scenario, so potentially there isn't that form of funding that would support that as a roading, the fact that the tolling has already happened on Te Ahua-Turanga might undermine our request for the Regional Ring Road because it makes it less tollable.
Yes, and I would say that supports in my mind, that supports the recommendation from the officers, which is to say, as I said earlier, I think it relates to the answer to your earlier question, which is, you know, tolling the ring road is going to be difficult, more difficult with a toll on Te Ahua-Turanga. So I think taking the opportunity to provide conditional support on the basis that, you know, I think if we don't take the opportunity now to try and leverage the revenue from the toll for the ring road or some other transport project, then the opportunity will be lost.
So on that leveraging point, the officer's report says we'd require a change in legislation to enable this. This is something that's currently not legal, what you're suggesting. Is there any indication that this would be an acceptable suggestion to the government or to NZTA Waka Kotahi?
Well, again, on the basis we had a very short amount of time to prepare the officer response to the notice of motion to get on the papers, What the government have signalled is that they're proposing new legislation for toll roads. That was announced at the infrastructure conference 2 weeks ago. We haven't done a detailed analysis of the current legislation, but what we have been told by officers is that effectively the funding will just top up the NLTP. If we're to look, and the government have also announced that they want to look at regional deals and look at means and ways of using new policy mechanisms, given that there's no new money. So if you think about all of those things together, then it may well be that there's some legislation needs to be amended, and they've signalled that there's new tolling legislation coming. So it's a perfect opportunity to say to the government, if you're going to be looking at putting in place tolls across the country, and I'd imagine other parts of the country will respond in similar ways to which we have, or what we've seen, then it's actually a good way of packaging up regional deals with increased revenue, and saying, well, how can you redirect that back into communities to get a win-win outcome? But it may well require legislative change, which is why we've included that in the submission, in the suggested approach to the submission.
Thank you, David. I think in another quote from my part of the world, God loves a trier. Thank you.
Councillor Hancock.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Thanks, David and James. Just going back to the level of the proposed level of tolling. So NZTA are currently consulting. How can they consult on that level of fund or that level of tolling without actually providing a tolling assessment?
I can't really comment on the lack of providing the tolling assessment. We, alongside many other people, have requested to see the evidence behind it, but what I can comment on is information that the rates that they've proposed is based upon the anticipated vehicle movements, like daily vehicle movements. So compared to North Auckland and Tauranga, because there's lower vehicle movements, they've argued the point that the toll rate needs to be higher. And so that's, from what we've been told, is the kind of, I guess, the justification or the direction, the steer behind why they've got the higher rates for Te Ahua Turanga compared to Otaki to North Levin. But it's really not until we get the tolling assessment we'll have a clearer picture of what was actually modelled in terms of their options.
If I could add to that as well, and I think the timing of the consultation probably reflects the fact that the ministers announced, that changes regarding tolling being one of the new policy funding mechanisms for transport, and the fact that the deadline or the completion of Te Ahua Turanga is approaching quite quickly. So ultimately, I think if the government's going to toll Te Ahua Turanga, the consultation needs to get out there ASAP, because in another 12 months it's going to be finished. Particularly if there's also legislation changes coming as well.
Yeah, thank you. Retrospective shakedown, perhaps. My next question just really is around sort of potential economic impacts. And I think we heard this morning that potentially there could be 40% of people, if the tolling goes ahead at the level that it is, 40% of vehicles, commercial and private, would actually choose to use either saddle road or Pae Toa track. Do we have any understanding at all in terms of the impacts around visitation and freight?
Consistent with our comments before, it's really hard without tolling assessment. But what I should note, based upon the feedback we've gotten from the freight industry, I think that 37% is probably, it's not an even spread amongst light and heavy vehicles. There's a high chance that the freight industry are more willing to pay those tolls. So of that 30% diversion, there's a lower amount of heavy vehicles compared to light vehicles. But again, we really need to see the tolling assessment, and we won't have a clearer picture until we see that.
But I guess in terms of our positioning and the geographical positioning in the country, if we've got freight, Wellington to Hawke's Bay, for example, there's potential, as I think we've already alluded to, that it's a double toll. So are we thinking about the impact of that in terms of our aspirations around, you know, a freight hub?
Yeah, I mean, again, all the feedback we've had from the freight operators or heavy vehicle operators is that they're in general supportive of a toll, a tolling in principle. You know, again, without, as we've said a number of times, this is not a detailed technical analysis. I mean, but you know, some of the conversations we had, you know, I'm not sure how much additional diesel a heavy vehicle would burn travelling across the Saddle Road or the Pahutua track versus using Te Awaturanga.
But the toll is a cost to the freight, the freight company, right?
Yes.
And who pays for that in the end? The consumer?
Presumably, yes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Zabellin.
Ngā mihi. Right. Pātai tōrua, tuatahi, the first question I have is, you referred to this approach as an alternative negotiating position with the government. When do we think any such negotiations would take place? I understand from the advice that it's effectively off the table for 3 years pending drastic change.
What's off the table for 3 years, sorry?
Negotiating a ring road, or you referred to the approach of the submission as an alternative negotiating position for council in relation to a ring road.
Yeah, well, a submission ultimately is a point of advocacy, and the city as you all know, the city represents a significant voice of this community. So, you know, in essence, I would expect that the submission would be received by Waka Kotahi as the city, if it's only going to support the toll if there's funding redirected to the Manawatu Regional Freight Ring Road. So, you know, I don't think this would result in a sit-down negotiation like you would see in a mediation or anything, but it's maybe it's a poor choice of words.
I might add to David's comment around so in terms of the NLTP, National Land Transport Program, that's allocated the funding of the National Land Transport Fund for the 3-year period. Now the thing is any toll introduced to Ahuaturanga hasn't been assigned as a result of that NLTP, so it's essentially money on top of what's been assigned, and so part of our advocacy is to try and get that money to stay within our region.
Right.
Sorry, if I could just add, sorry, I just reflected, sorry, Councillor Zabellin, in terms of your question, early answer was, I mean, just to be clear, like, officers are not here advocating for the toll, and haven't proposed the toll. What we're proposing is how best can we get something out of this for the community if there's a high likelihood that the toll's going to be applied.
Thank you. That segues very nicely. He pātai tuarua. The second question is, if we are actually successful in using this and leveraging this successfully, what kind of assurance could we expect that toll revenue would be redirected to local projects, and could that be walked back by a change of government in the future?
Yeah, and that's the choice of words in the Office of Advice and Supervision, which is about the immediate planning and delivery of the Manawatu Regional Freight Ring Road. So, again, as the papers have said, and we've got a workshop this afternoon, we haven't received any co-funding for the business case. So, you know, that would, in my mind, would see, you know, at least as a start, a commitment to funding the business case. And then potentially in the, you know, the NLTP doesn't get decided for another 3 years. But yeah, it's an interesting question. What formal commitment would look like to the Manawatu Regional Freight Ring Road? So.
Thank you. Right, he pātai tuatoru. Third question, you're referring to the ring road as a sort of central North Island, or the regional nature of that project. Who is the primary driver of that project?
Of the ring road?
Yeah.
So it's at the moment, certainly the city is leading, the council is leading that project, but we're working closely with Waka Kotahi as part of the wider Pinati project. It's a key supporting piece of infrastructure for Te Utu Tanganui, so the Te Utu Tanganui Governance Group have taken an active interest in the ring road as well. Yeah, it's city-led, but through our partnership with Waka Kotahi as co-funders.
Thank you. And lastly, very last one, is with this government direction signalling a change to the approach in tolling, could we reasonably assume that tolling the ring road is likely, although difficult, given that it hasn't been designed yet? Could it be designed with tolling in mind if we're wanting to align with where the government is at with tolls?
Yeah, I'd probably cover that in I think the answer to Councillor Bowen earlier. I mean, as I said, the way in which tolls are being proposed by the government across the country is new in the extent of them. So, you know, I think there's going to be a lot for the country to learn over the next decade if it becomes a mainstream form of revenue. But, you know, the only advice or reflections we can provide at the moment is I think if both O2NL and Tahuaturanga were tolled, then it may be more difficult to toll the ring road. That said, I think tolling the ring road was always going to be a bit of a challenge given the nature of that road. So if there was going to be two tolls in the region, then, yeah, as I said, the Office of Advice is how do we extract that funding to advance the ring road.
But unlikely, in your view, to have 3 tolls in the region? Hard to tell.
Yeah, hard to tell, but yeah.
Right, thank you. Kamutu, I'm finished.
Thanks, Councillor. We've got 4 left in the queue. Let's go to Councillor Finlay.
Thank you, Madam Chair. There is a question coming. As I live in the mighty Manawatu, I'm not an expert on tolls like people in the Bay of Plenty in Auckland. I don't know about tolls. And a lot of people in the Manawatu and the Tarua won't know about tolls. So this toll road is going to exist between Woodville and Palmerston North. Does everybody have to pay tolls? Do the army pay tolls? Do the ambulances pay tolls? Does the health shuttle pay tolls? Are there exemptions, or how do we go? Who pays tolls? Is it everybody or just some people? Do you know?
Waka Kotahi knows, and they can tell us at 2:30. They will tell. Linda will tell us at 2:30 because she told us that last night at the meeting. But she can tell us at 2:30 if you don't want to answer that, James.
So we don't know at this stage.
No, we do know because she told us last night. But ambulances don't have to pay tolls. Do you want to answer any more, James?
No, I think I'll leave it for Linda to answer this afternoon. It's probably a more accurate answer from her rather than myself.
Okay.
So the public will be given that information as well?
The workshop's it's a public workshop. If it's covered in the slides, they'll be made available. Yeah, we don't provide a transcript of the workshop. But.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Kia ora koutou. Thanks for being here to answer some questions. I'll just focus on a couple. You spoke before in response to the question about risk to relationships, about potential tension between central government and local government. I'd be interested in what consideration has been given around relationships with neighbouring local authorities in regards establishing the position as outlined by officers.
Yeah, again, I don't know, I've said this a number of times. I think we had a day or two to prepare this memo before the paper went out. Probably the only comment I'd make is in terms of the suggestion that funding is redirected to the Manawatu Regional Freight Ring Road, that is more than a Palmerston North project. It benefits Te Utu Tanganui, which creates jobs for people working in Tararua, Horowhenua, Manawatu, Whanganui.
And have officers given consideration to the asymmetry of costs that are faced by, for instance, a Tararua district versus others?
No, we haven't. And as I said, there's no detailed tolling assessment. This is not intended to be a comprehensive assessment of the pros and cons of the toll. It's more a negotiating position or starting point for a conversation with the government around their proposal. So ultimately, though, if residents do choose to live in more remote locations and commute to Palmerston North for work, there are costs associated with that.
Given that one of our strategic risks is around public loss of trust in council, if we were to back a position that was backing a broken promise to our Ashurst residents, what would that do to that risk status?
That may be something that I'd encourage elected members to think about when they vote on this matter. I don't think that's a matter for officers to provide advice on.
Can I understand what the total exposure might be on this? Is there any cap on total revenue of this toll over time?
We have asked some questions of Waka Kotahi about the total revenue. And yeah, without the tolling assessment, it's been a touch vague. I mean, we've done some back of the envelope calculations based on the vehicle numbers that we know and the proposed toll, which was up in the order of $500 or $600 million over 30 years. But I'm sure there's money that gets siphoned off along the way for various things and technology and bits and pieces.
I might just leave it there, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Fitzgerald.
Tēnā koe te whae o te tiamana, Madam Chair. Tēnā kora, thank you, David and James. You might not be able to answer this question, but and I recall, not everyone in the chamber would recall that tolls was actually a telephone service you used to make a direct collect call, yeah, that's right. And it was free. David and David and James, I noticed on the Tararua District website that control of the replacement highway is going to be handed back to Tararua District Council. Is it likely that the tolls would be supporting the cost for that council to maintain the highway? Are you familiar with that?
Which highway, sorry?
The Te Awa Tūranga.
Te Awa Tūranga will be continued to controlled by Waka Kotahi.
Waka Kotahi, okay, yeah. Cool.
Obviously, I think that the saddle roads currently, a lot of the maintenance of the saddle roads currently being managed by Waka Kotahi in the interim period, but my understanding is that the saddle road would go back to a little bit of Palmerston North and Tararua.
For sure. Yep. And last question, obviously through the planning of the Manawatu Freight Ring Road development and design, I mean, this conversation didn't exist until the 9th of September. So in terms of funding and support to be derived from any toll, what would the risk be to the freight road development if there was no toll?
If there was no toll, then it would effectively be in the same position we are today where there's no toll. So we have no toll, the road's still going to be built, but what we don't have at the moment is any commitment or funding avenue for the Manawatu Regional Freight Ring Road at all.
Okay.
So there's not even funding to do the business case in the next 3 years. Again, that was, don't want to repeat myself, but the toll was not the officer's proposal. The officer advice is how best can we leverage something for our community if a toll is going to be proposed.
Wonderful. Thanks, David. Thanks, James. Madam Chair.
The Mayor.
Kia ora, thanks, Madam Chair. Thanks, David and James. You spoke about leverage points, etc., and saying that the potential regional freight ring road is difficult to toll, yet it's going to have an entry point of a new downstream bridge. Do you not think that could be the start and end point of it, i.e. a toll bridge, in the same way the Auckland Harbour Bridge was tolled, in the same way the Opiki Bridge was tolled in the 1920s? Do you think that's a possible example? I'm just thinking of ways that we can leverage this if we've got an outcome.
Yeah, it is. I guess, as we said earlier, the challenge, and it's actually part of the challenge we have with the Manawatu Regional Freight Ring Road in general, is there's so many multiple ways into Palmerston North.
But there'll be only one way over that bridge both ways.
Yeah, I agree. The challenge, though, is State Highway 56 provides a very similar level of service to State Highway 57. So if there's a toll across the bridge, and 57 and 56 are very comparable routes in terms of time, the quality of the road. So that's the challenge we've always had with the Manawatu Regional Freight Ring Road and actually getting the bridge funded, which I think would always be there would have to be substantial detuning or speed reductions to State Highway 56, I think.
Well, have you driven 56 lately? I think there's a substantial difference at the moment between 57 and 56. 56 is in poor order. 57 is much better order.
Yeah, I'm just reflecting that a lot of the commentary that's happened over a number of years with the Pinnerty business case. So, yeah.
So you're saying that one road would have to be picked over the other? Is that what your advice would be?
Certainly, all the analysis that's gone into Pinnerty since it was completed was that if a bridge, so it supports a bridge at approximately Longburn, and that would require prioritisation of State Highway 57, and that would mean over time State Highway 56 would have to either be, speed, reduced maintenance, reduced asset management, reduced speed, and enhancements made to 57.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of corners in 57s, taking those out. I mean, the reason why Pinnerty identified the downstream bridge at Longburn and 57, of course, is 57 is the route also to Hawke's Bay. So it's the logical one to invest in because it serves both Palmerston North and Hawke's Bay. However, and as I said, tolls are a new policy initiative for funding. I don't think anyone confesses to be a tolling expert, and I don't think anyone has a crystal ball to say if there is a toll at O2NL and a toll at Tauraturanga, will there be one for the ring road? But, I think 3 tolls,
I'm not suggesting 3 tolls. I'm just trying to get some understanding and advice out of you around what the ring road could look like, or a toll bridge, or whatever it's going to be. Yeah.
Yeah, well, the ring road is depicted in the Pinnerty documents, and it prioritises 57, and the council's
And it could come right up to the corner of Kairing and Bunnythorpe line, couldn't it? I mean, it could be a stretch, the bridge and a stretch of road which captures both 56 and 57.
Yes, yeah. The challenge will be for NZTA or Waka Kotahi what they do with 56. And
okay, all right, thank you. Just also, Madam Chair, I'm happy just to move on the officer's report, just one only.
We're not talking about that at the moment.
Are we? Well, I thought we were.
No, we're not moving anything on this. We're just talking about the document and then we'll go to the notice of motion.
Okay, cool.
Thank you. Right, 2 more councillors and then we're moving off this document. 3, someone. Okay, Councillor Arnott.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, gentlemen. What do you think the chances are of the government putting a weight restriction on the old road, the saddle, like they have on other roads that have been replaced by new routes? So, trucks would no longer be able to use the saddle. They'd have to use the new road.
Yeah,
quite likely.
I can't answer that question. It may be something we want to appreciate the council has to make a decision today, but it may be something we want to ask Waka Kotahi this afternoon.
Councillor Mickelard.
Oh, thank you, Madam Chair. E te hemana, tēnā koe, ngā me maho te committee, tēnā koutou. Thank you for the officers for all the responses that you've provided. I think that's kind of filled some gaps in my knowledge. But just coming back on the Saddle Road, which part is Tararua's part to maintain and which part is Palmerston to maintain before you went to Waka Kotahi? Because I remember Mayor Tracy in the news saying that it costs them about $1 million a year to sort of maintain.
I don't have the exact location, but the border is roughly a little bit past the bridge over the river. Yeah. So we have the bridge and a little bit more, and the majority of the Saddle Road is Tararua's.
Okay, so currently the whole road is under Wakakotai.
Correct.
Oh, okay, cool. Thank you. That helps a lot.
Thank you.
Excuse me, Madam Chair. Sorry, just in terms of Councillor Arnott's earlier question about the weight restrictions. It's covered in the paper, but my understanding is to put in place a toll, there has to be a viable alternative route for all vehicles. So the Saddle Road or Pahutua track would still have to be made available for all vehicles, including freight. Yeah.
Thank you. And I think some of these questions will be clarified with Wakakotahi this afternoon. Deputy Mayor, final question. Hold on.
Tēnā koe te hea mana o tira, tēnā tātou. Ngā mihi kia koe, David, kōrua ko James. Just with regards to 2.6, and you've mentioned that on Tuesday, September the 2nd, we were provided with confirmation of the co-funding allocation, and there were a range of significant council transport projects that did not receive co-funding. Do we know what percentage of those, what the percentage was of those?
I might let Glenn answer this. He has a bit more detail on.
Through the chair, the high-level summary is council received substantial funding for its maintenance, operation and renewals of its core roading network. Council received very little funding for its walking and cycling active transport activity. Council received co-funding for the Amberley Bridge, which is very, very good news, but received no other funding for capital new type programs, health and safety type issues, or new assets for the city. We're certainly doing a bit of work on that at the moment, and we'll bring a report back early October with a more detailed response.
Thank you. And with regards to 2.9 on page 22, the proposed toll does not provide council with the opportunity to try and leverage the additional funding that will be raised for the benefit of the regional transport network. I suppose that word try, I think, was teased out through Councillor Zabellin. And given that 2.6 says that, you know, we didn't actually get much. Well, not, yeah, we didn't get much in that, receive much in co-funding. Is it really a viable option to try? How likely are we to get anything if we try?
Well, I think that's why the officer advice also includes the requirement that the government look at legislation to link that funding to local projects. So rather than just sort of it being some sort of agreement or something like that, it's actually something that we say, here's an we say to the government, here's an, as I said earlier, here's an opportunity. I think if they're going to be looking at introducing tolls across the country, then there's likely to be similar conversations that happen. So maybe what we're saying is if there's changes to legislation that actually enable the revenue to be linked back to specific projects, then actually we can be a catalyst or a leader in demonstrating how that can work, and that could be linked to regional deals as well. So I guess what we're saying is the submission is the start point for that conversation. So it's best described as trying, but it may well be, as I said, that redirecting local funding is something that is a tool that's introduced to the legislation, which will actually help them to introduce more tolls and take pressure off the NLTP, because I'm sure there'll be regional projects required wherever tolls are introduced.
Could I just ask, you know, that process of, you know, if we were to go down that pathway, is that likely to be achieved or realised if we were successful within a year? How long would such a process take?
Well, I understand they're looking at introducing legislation this year regarding the greater rollout of tolls. Yeah, again, as I said, I think we could potentially be a leader in demonstrating to government and NZTA about how we can get good regional support for tolls. you know, I can't speak for the community, but I think people would be potentially more willing to accept a toll if they knew that they were going to get other improvements to their transport network that they use on a daily basis.
And my final question is, in your capacity, how do we relate with other regions, cities or regions, regarding central government support? Do we feature highly, or do we fly below the radar and are often overlooked?
Yeah, I think certainly the sense is, from a transport perspective, that Palmerston North particularly has been overlooked. I think, you know, there's O2NL and Te Aho-Turanga get pointed to as, you know, major investments. Te Aho-Turanga is, as we said earlier, a new replacement road. O2NL is a significant investment in the wider region, but we desperately need, if we're to achieve a lot of the objectives we want around the urban part of Palmerston North, then removing heavy vehicles from our transport network accessing to Tanganui is something we need to achieve, and at the moment there's not a clear path to how that's going to be funded.
Tēnā koe, David. Kōrua ko James. Kia ora, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Appreciate those questions. Thank you very much, James and David. Thank you for answering all those questions. You did well. We're now going to move back to item 9 and move to Councillor Barrett. This is your notice of motion, so we'll hand over to you. It's not doing it. There you go.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, colleagues. Appreciate all the questions that have come through this morning and your interest in this. Obviously, this notice of motion is around the recently proposed tolling of Te Ahu-Aturanga, the Manawatu-Tararua Highway. My view on this is that on behalf of our constituents and our neighboring communities, we need to send a very clear, simple message to the NZTA and to the Minister. It's just 4 short words. Keep it toll-free. This is a replacement road. We have already paid $620 million for this road, and we completely oppose paying twice. Now, quite fairly, our region has paid our fuel taxes, we've paid our RUCs over the years, and that's helped build toll-free roads all over the Motu. The Waikato Expressway, the Kapiti Expressway, Transmission Gully, Waterview Tunnel, Christchurch Motorways, the list goes on. So it is only fair that this road, which is practically complete now, stays toll-free. I want to be really clear that this notice of motion is only about this replacement road. I think we can debate other roads at other times, but this is a very specific case that needs its own focus now. And it needs that focus because tolling the road creates a huge number of problems. So after we paid for it once with taxes, and then we'd have to pay for it again with tolls, we'd be paying a third time to fix the local roads that have been hammered by drivers that are avoiding the toll. The Ashurst residents, some of whom we heard from this morning, have already endured, or will have endured, 8 years of that state highway pouring through their village. They have been promised repeatedly that State Highway 3 going through their village is temporary. This toll will break those promises. Our neighbors, especially Tararua District residents, will be quite severely punished by costs coming from this, driving up the cost of access to health services, social opportunities, education, employment opportunities. It will cost them dearly. A daily commute would cost around $2,000 per annum. So even with 4 in a car, that's very steep. There's no bus. They're stuck, and that is deeply unfair. The final cost that I'll mention, Madam Chair, is around the road toll. Families and loved ones will pay the highest price of all, with more deadly crashes on the unsafe alternative routes. Unsafe. That's not my word. That is NZTA's word in their business case. These roads are demonstrably unsafe, and it frustrates me to no end that they're now being put forward as feasible alternatives. How feasible is it to put people in harm's way? I find that to be a very dangerous precedent to be setting. Absolutely agree our region needs more transport investment, especially after the recent NLTP announcements. But tolling this road isn't the way. It creates far more problems than it would solve. Won't go too far into the officers' reports and all the red flags in there, but just say I think that a conditional support approach is quite a risky bit of a Pandora's box that we don't really want to get into at this stage. This, colleagues, is important. We need to be very, very clear on this. Your support for the notice of motion in its original form is the best way to get a simple, clear message to NZTA and to the Minister regarding Te Ahua Tauranga, and that message is keep it toll-free. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thanks, Councillor. Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I was thinking how best to explain really what this is. And the phrase that comes to mind is highway robbery. And in case you think I'm exaggerating, the definition of highway robbery is blatant and unfair overcharging. And that's what this is. And it's not just blatant and unfair overcharging for the people of Tararua. It's also for our people in Palmerston North and from people wider afield. Now, some of us made the trip, the dangerous trip over the saddle last night in the dark. We were at the public meeting in Woodville. And let me tell you that the whole of Woodville turned out to that meeting. There were hundreds of people there. People were standing 2 and 3 rows deep at the back. And if I had to characterise the vibe of that meeting, I'd say there was a strong sense of betrayal and anger from the people there. And it wasn't just residents, although residents alone would justify it. We heard from local business owners. We heard from someone who uses the health shuttle 3 times a week, how these tolls would cost the health shuttle $30,000 a year on average. And that shuttle's driven by volunteers to enable people from Woodville to access the regional hospital. We heard from iwi. Mavis Mullins gave an excellent speech about the level of deprivation in Tararua and the impact of tolls on people living there. And she described it as unfair, cruel and wrong. And I agree with her. I also think we need to consider as a council what it means to be a good neighbour. What does it mean to be a good neighbour to our colleagues in Tararua Council? It certainly doesn't mean throwing them under the bus and saying, sure, we'll have a toll if the money comes to us. I find that an unconscionable suggestion, to be honest. And this isn't about how we can leverage something out of this. This is about, is it right to toll a replacement road when the actual road has been closed by NZTA for 7 years because it's unsafe? Is it right to put the costs of maintaining the alternative routes, which, as far as we can tell, because we haven't seen the tolling assessment, but from estimates, would have 4,000 to 5,000 vehicles going through them every day? That will cost Tararua Council $1 million a year. Do you think their ratepayers can afford that? And then we've got our own people in Ashurst, who I must say have been extremely patient, and I thought were very measured in their comments this morning. But it's not going to take much for people to realise that what they were promised of getting their quiet lifestyle village back again isn't going to happen, that they're going to continue having a state highway dividing their village, as we heard this morning. So I don't think there's any possible position that we could take as a council other than to say that we oppose tolling this road. Now, I know there were lots of questions about Palmerston North Freight Ring Road, and that to me is another project. The funding for that has got its own business case, and I don't think we should be conflating the two things here. I wouldn't necessarily be opposed to a toll on a road if it were consulted on at the start and the community had a chance to be involved. But NZTA's own policy is being ignored on this. Their own policy says that if they're going to introduce a toll, it should be part of the consultation before the road is constructed. So I really ask you, councillors, to consider what's the right position to take on this? For our own people, for people in Tararua, for a sense of fairness, and I just ask you to do the right thing on this. Thank you.
Councillor Mickelard.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for the opportunity to actually speak on this. I think my argument can be summarized in 2 words: toll it. I speak in favor of recommendation, probably proposed by the officers or outlined by the officers in the report. And I think my concerns initially, looking at this, was around the pricing or the toll rates, which were actually suggested, of $4.30 for light vehicles and $8.60 for heavy vehicles. And I'm sure the recommendation that that the officers are actually presenting to us actually deals with that in a sense. While I appreciate that the toll was not part of the initial planning or consultation on the new highway, I'm generally in favor of the toll roads. These are largely because tolls are a great way of easing traffic congestion and enhancing road functionality. They are a great way of generating revenue and recovering the high costs of delivering transport infrastructure. They provide the council also the opportunity to leverage additional funds that will be raised for the benefit of the regional transport network, and these have been found to be true in Auckland and Tauranga. It is consistent also with the government's policy on and general direction around, regarding the greater use of user pay principle for transport and infrastructure. In saying this, I think it's important to see this highway as a significant upgrade for the region, rather than just seeing this as a replacement project. I believe that we should be open to a wide range of funding tools to ensure that we are able to deliver the roads that would allow residents and freight to get where they want to go quickly and safely. This should be seen as an opportunity to raise much needed revenue that could be redirected to the immediate planning and delivery of the Manawatu Regional Freight Ring Road. Motorists, I think, also, and freight operators, I think, will benefit significantly from the travel time saving of 12 to 14 minutes per trip. And I believe that those who do not want to pay the toll can always use alternative roads, such as the Saddle Road and Paetua Track. Just like when I enter Tauranga, I use alternative road to avoid the toll if I don't want to pay for it. While I acknowledge the risks that have been proposed to toll this road, in the sense that it would discourage some motorists from using the new highway, and instead of, and will continue using the Saddle Road or Paetua Track, impacting on council operational costs. The other risk that I foresee also is this, that a council position that does not align with government policy on infrastructure funding presents a risk of misalignment for future infrastructure funding. In conclusion, I think it would be remiss of me not to push back on some of the comments that have been made earlier or put forward by the mover, and also through comments that have been made earlier. Points 5 and 6 of the notice of motion says that we're going to lose a competitive advantage if we are to actually toll this. I disagree. Good quality roads are good for economic growth and the movement of freight. I don't see us losing a competitive advantage to other logistics hubs such as Canterbury or Waikato, because some of those roads of national significance within those regions are being proposed for tolling. And also, from an economic growth and development perspective, the research actually points to the fact that freight companies actually like this, because if you can move and travel faster than usual and more efficiently, you'd be willing to pay the toll to this. And the consultation that officers presented earlier on, that they consulted these freight companies. Freight companies will be willing to pay to move their goods faster and more efficiently. The other point also that was touched on, I think on point 6 of the notice of motion, is that the fuel tax and road user charges are well proven and successful mechanism for government to gain revenue. That's not true, because if this was true, we'll not be where we are right now, where we're actually suggesting tolls, because those revenues have not proven to be good mechanism for generating the revenue that's needed to maintain road and to build new infrastructure. The other thing that I also want to push back is around the public loss of trust that has been alluded earlier on. I mean, let's be honest. The other NZTA is a government agency, and they act to serve the government of the day. Yes, it's true, when this new road was built, the Labour government probably didn't anticipate to actually tow this road. But they're there to serve the government of the day. This is a new directive. There's nothing they can do but to serve the government of the day and push this. This might not have been consistent with the previous transport policy of the Labour government or the previous government, but it is of the current government, and they are just doing their job. So this whole thing about public trust around NZTA or the lack of consultation, the initial
Wind it up, Councillor.
and the lack of consultation at the very beginning of the project doesn't stick or doesn't hold water, because they're there to serve the government of the day. And I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Appreciate that. Councillor Wood, you've only got 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you to Councillor Michelot. I agree with everything he's just said, but I would like to start by thanking the mover and seconder for bringing this forward, because I agree it is an item and a matter of significance to our region that the council should have an opinion on. So I appreciate you bringing this to us and giving us this opportunity to have the debate. Now, in saying that, I don't agree with you. I often sit in this chamber and have councillors wave their fist in the air and blame the government for everything that's going on, so it's my turn to do that. Why is this happening? Well, in 2017, when this road was announced, the government debt was $33.7 billion, and the government was posting an $8.3 billion surplus. In 2023, the government debt had ballooned to $83.3 billion and was posting a $4.5 billion deficit. So if only Minister Bridges had a crystal ball at that point and seen the 6 years of wanton economic mismanagement that's left our government crippled in their ability to fund these kind of roads, then perhaps they would have consulted. On putting a toll on the road in the first place. But unfortunately, we don't have a crystal ball, and we haven't been able to see that destruction, as I've alluded to, with statistics which are true. So, the mover and seconder have lamented that fuel taxes and RUCs paid by a community have gone out of region. Absolutely. All the more reason they should be in support of a user pays model where those that use the road pay for the road. In fact, the only alternative to putting a toll on this road is that the government increases fuel tax and increases RUCs to pay for the roads of significance that need to be built to get our infrastructure to a level that we can grow as a country. And so the alternative here is that every member of our community, whether they use it or not, or no matter how often they may use it, will be paying for it. Whether you're somebody who just drives around town, you'll be paying for roads in Auckland or the South Island or Hamilton or wherever else. So this is the best way that we can protect our community from paying for roads out of region, by making sure that those that use this road pay for it. Now, there was something alluded to in the questions that there'll be some sort of cost pass on to our community. That is absolutely not what will happen. A company will go, what are the savings we're going to get from saving 20 minutes each away and across versus what's the cost of it? If it costs them more to use the road, then they won't use it. If it doesn't cost them more to use the road, then they will use it. So there will be a saving to the community, not a cost. So there aren't any costs that are going to be passed on. In terms of Ashurst as well, there'll be a significant reduction in those that use that road, up to 63%. But more to that point, if NZTA puts a toll in and then finds that there aren't many people using the road, then they'll drop the price of the toll. It's not rocket science, it's market demand. Either the people will be willing to pay it or they won't. And so if they're not willing to pay it, then that price will go down by nature, because NZTA won't be extracting what they need to extract out of it. I'd also note in terms of government legislation, well, I appreciate that hasn't been brought to the House yet, but talking with government MPs, my understanding is that existing roads will become part of legislation as open to being able to be tolled. And I appreciate that isn't there yet, but I would just hazard a warning to the Chamber that potentially many of the roads listed that are existing may become open to tolling. So it may not. We'll wait and see where that goes. I'd also like to point out the hypocrisy of us to sit here and look at the government saying we don't have the revenue and we don't have the debt capacity to be able to fund the roads we need, and suggest tolling as an alternative, when we're doing the exact same thing, although through a different mechanism, wastewater treatment plant. We don't have the debt capacity or the revenue to pay for it, so we're putting it into a separate body and then charging a toll or charging a fee to all the people that use it. So how dare we sit here and say, oh, the government can't do that? It's exactly the same thing that we're doing, just through a different mechanism, up to $1,000 a year for our community. When you don't have the money, you don't have the balance sheet, and you don't have the income to support it, you look at other ways of generating that income, and in my view, a user pays system is a much better way of generating that income, rather than putting a blanket tax across our entire community to pay for it. So let's be realistic, let's work with the government of the day, and let's get this road working for our community. I'm more than happy to second the Mayor's recommendation. I am perfectly in support that the proposed rate is too high, and I think we can all agree on that. And would be in support of it coming down to a lower rate, more in line with tolls we've seen across the rest of the country. But please, councillors, let's be realistic here, not ideological. Let's work with the government and let's get some good infrastructure for our country.
Okay, thank you, councillor. I'm just looking at the list and it's long, so if we can just keep, okay. Well, okay, councillor Zabellin.
Ngā mihi, ina aku whakaro here are my thoughts. First up, I am in favour generally of a user pays approach for new roading infrastructure. Makes sense. I'm specifically to this submission that we're looking at in this particular instance, I'm not in favour of a submission that uses the word support at all, even conditional support, because that's going on a spreadsheet somewhere in a summary of submissions, and that feedback is reported back to the government and it will be counted as support, not opposition. And our conditions, which are effectively ultimatums, we won't support this unless you do this for us, they'll count for very little and I think not be in the least bit effective. At best, it looks like grasping, and at worst it looks like petulance. And I'm actually not against a bit of well-placed petulance, but I just think it's better if you're defending and not going with your hand out. I think the officer's recommendation is essentially encouraging us to take a wider view, that the tolling proposal for Te Āhua-Tūranga can help us to look for opportunities to progress other long-awaited projects. I think that's a great approach, but I am taking a longer-term view than that and looking ahead to when both of those roads could be open and operational, and what the compounding impact of having 2 or maybe 3 adjacent toll roads in our region that are twice the cost of other tolls. There's no guarantee that the ring road wouldn't be tolled. It hasn't even been designed yet. And in that context, I agree with the notice of motion that tolling Te Āhua-Tūranga would run counter to our city's economic growth plans to attract logistics investment, especially if you add a tolled ring road into that mix. Additional costs for our region that aren't faced in other logistics hubs does put us at a competitive disadvantage because that concentration of tolling here. Getting that ring road built would be an amazing achievement, but not if it's launched in a regional network of back-to-back toll roads. If anything, it's a great promo for freight rail. But what I appreciate about this notice of motion is it's clearly not a position on tolls generally, but only to Te Āhua-Tūranga, and that's a clear message that I'm happy to send. And if this is a political game and we're trying to toe the line now so that we can maybe get what we want in the future, I think that's a big gamble and it comes with no assurances of success. So I appreciate the intent of the officer's recommendation, but I would prefer that we send a clear message from our community who've told us about the cost of living impacts on them continually, and not send a conditional, quasi-supportive but toothless ultimatum. So I will be supporting this notice motion. Thank you. Ngā mihi.
Thanks, councillor. Councillor Meehan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm on the fence. I appreciate what's been said both ways, but it's probably come down to principle for me. I don't care what government's in on the day. This was not consulted on at the start. There was no mention of that. It's a replacement road, don't care how you want to channel it. For those that are a little bit old in the tooth than some, we know what the gorge has been doing to us for many, many years, and should have been fixed up a long, long time ago. The cost of revenue that's going to come in each day on their estimate of 11,000 vehicles is unbelievable. And then, as we've already heard it said, will it be stopped? Will the toll be stopped, or will it just carry on and be channeled somewhere else? I don't think we get a lot in this region from anybody. It doesn't matter which government's in on the day. I asked, in general, one of my oldest son what he thought about the idea, and he quite clearly said, well, he'd be happy to pay a toll to be able to go somewhere on a better road, quicker, everything else. The other thing that comes back to me is when we hear that freight services and transport have no problem with tolls. Of course they don't. And we've heard it said that a quicker route, less on their diesel and everything else, but to believe that they're not going to put the cost of the toll back on the people at the bottom of the pile receiving their service is absolutely Hey? I mean, business is business. Here's a shot to make a bit more profit. We can save a bit of gas and stuff like that. The little guy at the bottom's still gonna get the toll stuck on them. And nobody should kid themselves any other way. Rich get richer, poor get poorer. It's never, ever changed. So, I suppose you can hear by my comments which way I'm favouring, but I'm struggling a little bit with it as well, because I appreciate the fact that we may be able to negotiate. We may be able to get some money in here. Yeah, right.
Councillor Finlay.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Back in 2016-17, the decision was made to close the gorge because it was too dangerous. And the government said, we'll give you a replacement road. And they came to us and they gave us 3 or 4 choices, if you remember. And we went out and we talked about it and we had it at favourite, which the government didn't like because it was going to cost them a wee bit more. So they went the cheapest way, which I, at the time, thought was a stupid thing to do, but never mind. And they said to everybody, here we are, we'll do it this way, Ashurst will have to suffer for a while, we'll do this fancy new road for you. Aren't we good? Here it is. It's your replacement road. But like a mean and nasty parent, the government comes along and says, here's an ice cream. And then says, but you got to pay for it first. And that's exactly what they've done. They've said to us, ever since 2016-17, we're giving you this replacement road. Here we are, about a year out of opening up the road and getting out there and driving on it. They says, no, you're going to have to pay to use it now. I can't support that. That's just mean-fisted. The government promised us a replacement road for the gorge, and it doesn't matter which government it was a government promise. Well, they're saying you can still have it, but you got to pay for it, otherwise use the other way. No, I won't support it. I'll support this notice of motion because I think the government's a bit late with their coming out and saying you got to pay for it. They're just like a mean-fisted parent.
Thanks, Councillor. Councillor Bowen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Colleagues, you gathered from my questions, I'm just not buying this whole new road shenanigans. This isn't a new road. Councillor Finlay's just said that. It's a replacement road. It's the gorge just shifted over a little bit. And so I really appreciate what this recommendation does, which separates this conversation. I think the risk that we were in our previous conversation is conflating this road with potential future roads, with potential future funding mechanisms, and the very real funding issues that we face as a council now. And I appreciate officers' attempts to try and find a way through some of those really difficult conversations for us. But I think we are in danger of overcomplicating what is in front of us today, which is simply a decision about the submission on Te Awa Turanga. And I want to be really clear that this is a submission to NZTA for their recommendation to the Minister. This isn't us opening a negotiation with the government about the future roading of Palmerston North and the wider Manawatu and our ring road capacity. This is a submission which, as Councillor Zabelin quite rightly said, will end up being a line on someone's spreadsheet as it goes to the Minister. So let's not think we've got a hand to play here. We really don't. This is just our contribution to the process. And there was a point made about a loss of trust. I think Councillor Barrett raised that earlier. My understanding here is the risk of loss of trust is not about NZTA at all. NZTA are clearly a government agency. They know exactly what they're doing and their space in this debate. The risk of loss of trust is for us and our community, primarily our Ashurst community, who have an expectation that we will stand with them in getting what the government promised them in the first place, but also our wider community. And I'm sure I'm not alone in, over the last few days, having talked to employers in the region who are really worried about their ability to attract and retain members of staff with this additional cost on people getting to work. Conversation with a senior member of the UCOL team yesterday. UCOL will be submitting against the tolling because they're really worried about the impact on their student population, many of whom travel across the hill. So it's our job of council to represent the views of our community. For me, the views of our community are they never expected to be tolled for this road, and they don't see why they should be, and we need to stand with them to support that view, and I have no problem in doing so. Because really, it's not like they couldn't have suggested that they tolled this road when they decided they were going to do it. Other roads were being tolled at that time. There are other roads that have already been tolled in New Zealand. This road could have been proposed as a toll road, and it wasn't. And so we need to stick to that. And so that's why I'll be supporting this recommendation. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor. Councillor Dennison.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm also going to be supporting the notice of motion and really come against a view of supporting the officer's recommendations. Respect them, but I struggle to support them. And I think our colleagues around the table have covered the proposition and the past of where we've got to, and we're almost finished now, and now we have a process where we have a short-term timing where we can't get the community views. I appreciate the comment made around the small selection of members of our community that come in for public comment, and yet the meeting last night across the gorge was loaded with members, and I'm sure with given a bit more notice we would have had the gallery loaded and some other community hall loaded with our own public, giving us this clear message of a protest against this proposal. And so my view is one to reflect the community viewpoint, and I would say that that's where I sit most comfortably in this whole process. When we talked about earlier about the unintended consequences, that point around the student population that lives across the broader gorge location, I think that puts a barrier and an unfairness on that young student to be paying the whatever fee it is there and back. We have an ageing population and that needs health care and other needs of social connection that are going to have to pay that same fee, which was calculated, if you do it every day, is about $2,000 a year. So that's no small amount of money that's not getting spent in the Woodville community for any commuter that lives in the city, and vice versa, actually, if somebody's crossing the gorge to teach or to work or whatever, the other way. There's just a lot of money going into that roading that's taken out of our local economy. So I think that's a very fair point. And that's not to miss the little 1 and 2 ad hoc trips that somebody forgets to load up on their phone to pay the fees in advance and get the admin fee of $4.90 on top for each way, and all these other added loaded fees and charges that come as a consequences of not being familiar with the system and the process. And I just think the public-private partnership, the private part of that is really in for a win, I see. Taking the advantage out of our own local community into their own private hands. And I don't necessarily see that it's been reinvested into our roads for upkeep or for new roads or anything else. So it just looks stink, and I think the public viewpoint that I mentioned early on is one of protest, and the two words I come off to is representing the community view that is two words, pissed off. And so, you know, that's the stance I'll take today. Thanks.
The Mayor.
Kia ora, thanks, Madam Chair. I'll try and use slightly better language. Look, I've changed my mind on this, and Councillor Barrett and Councillor Johnson will be quite happy that I'm actually going to support this. But I'll give you a couple of reasons why. I went over to Woodville last night, and to say that there wasn't pitchforks in the room was probably an understatement. It was packed to the gunnels, and I got up and actually spoke. And I looked out at the crowd, and I did wonder if there was anybody left at home in Woodville. It was seriously, everyone was there, and I'd have to say it was 95% that they were opposed. But it was the private, and all the reasons everyone said earlier, so I won't repeat those. I mean, all the student and the health things. So the road is a real link for that district or that region to us. and probably more so than we actually realise, and it came out. I got the opposite side earlier in the morning when I opened the Halls Transport Lower North Island Distribution Centre, where they are all for tolls. And if I could just bear with me, you know, an $8 freight charge on a B train holding $50,000 to $80,000 worth of stock, it's very, very minimal, guys. So that's where the business sector are in support. Transport New Zealand CEO has written to us, and again, they're not saying every single operator will have this view, but they do think that majority of transport operators would be okay with the toll if there was better, if there was maintenance and better investment. So look, I can see both sides to the argument, but actually I think the private car user, the private person will actually suffer quite a lot, and the tolls are twice what the national average is. So, and all the arguments about replacement road, I mean, they all have real merit. So, but I've got an alternative coming, and I'll leave that till after lunch, where I do think there is an argument around a principled approach and negotiated approach on new toll roads, because I think somebody said we don't get a lot from all governments, and this is just not this government, this is a government issue for at least the decade I've been here, is there's been underinvestment in roading. So they talk about the waters network being underinvested. Well, wait, what's happening? The whole transport network is coming, and local roads and everything else, highways, is underinvested. And if we don't engage with extra revenue opportunities, then we do that at our own peril. So I'm very much in favour of, at the start of the conversation, of a new road where there is an alternative that we look at the options of tolls. And I did say in my discussion last night that I'm seeking, I'd be encouraging people to put submissions in around seeking solutions. So the government has an out. So they have an option to say, okay, we'll have a look at something else. So, and also not being an extension, just purely oppositional, that we are trying to be influential rather than just oppositional. But look, I think we have to look at the weight of the argument here. And yes, the freight sector are saying we're okay, but actually our communities, and I thought Ashurst were pretty measured in their response. You speak to the people of Te Puke and Rodney, and actually it isn't as bad as they all make out, but actually this is a slightly different road to some of those other options, and I do think Ashurst have put up with quite a lot. I was there in those earlier meetings. I then brought the CE of the day into my office, and we negotiated a deal for Ashurst where they got some road calming. The schools were involved. They got a reseal, and you know, we got some investment for Ashurst, and that was the deal that was struck. And there was no mention of tolling the road at that stage. So I think I'm going to support this, but I do want to caveat that we should be directly negotiating on what we can control or influence, and that is the regional freight ring road. So I just want to put it out there that I have an alternative coming. We'll talk about that after lunch. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm just going to put my thoughts up, and then we'll go to Councillor Arnott, and back to you, Councillor Barrett. My view is I'm actually going to vote against it, and my reasons is because what the officers put up I did agree with, and that's in terms of that I think that we should be asking them to lower the toll rate. I actually think that's what we should be going back to them and saying, yes, these rates that they've put up are ridiculous and they're too high. I do think that was a good suggestion by the officers, and that we should be asking it to go towards what we need because we haven't got enough funding. And I think that's what we should be looking for, because us as a region need more funding, and that's what we should be looking for. So that's why I am voting against it, because I think we should be sticking up for ourselves as a council and trying to get funding for us as a council. So that's why I am voting against it. I think that tolls are necessary for certain things, and that's why I am voting against this notice of motion. Councillor Arnott.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I totally agree with what you just said, and I'll also be voting against this. Yeah, it sounds to me as if people are telling me, or people are saying we're about to lose 2 roads. You know, we're gaining a 3rd. People have choices, and yeah, I'd push back against the whole UCOL student thing. They'll just come a different road, won't they? So those are my feelings, and you know, 10 years later, the gorge, no more slips have come down, and perhaps we should have persevered with that road. Thank you.
Councillor Barrett, we're back to you. Right to reply.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, colleagues. Really appreciate hearing from so many of you on this. So many good one-liners, but honestly, highway robbery, that takes the day, and I hope that ends up in a lot of headlines. Just to pick up on a few points that have been made, the one around, you know, supporting a lower toll, Madam Chair, absolutely, this is aligned with that. This sets the toll at 0, and I'd encourage you to vote in favor accordingly. We heard a little bit about, ultimately, the question of who we serve. Are we here to serve the government of the day? Do we take our orders from the beehive? We're here to serve this community, and we have heard loud and clear that there is a massive and widening gap between the government's direction on this particular question and the community's views. We are here to serve our community, to back them, and honestly, anybody that's prepared to sit and look at the community in the eye and say, I was prepared to back a broken promise. I was prepared to load hundreds of millions of dollars of cost back into this. I was prepared to cut off, economically, a number of people in Tararoa District from our cities and the services we provide. Not a good look. Second thing to pick up on is around the user pays side of things. A few things there. One is obviously it hits those the hardest that have the least ability to pay. A family doing it hard can't just pass that cost on to somebody else. Whereas a business, yep, absolutely. They will keep passing those costs on. It will be costs that will land in our back pockets. And so I do not support, in this case, for a replacement road, user pays. I'm quite looking forward to the conversation this afternoon because I think new roads are a different matter, and I thank the mayor for drawing a bright line between what we're talking about here in Te Ahu Aotearoa and the future discussion about new roads, because I do think those are two very distinct, different cases. User pays not only hits the poor the hardest, it hits our neighbors particularly hard, and those are the same neighbors that we're actually trying to have some strategic discussions with, yes, about water and co-investing there. And so sucking a bunch of money out of those communities, I'm not thinking that that's kind of the way that we would want to be signaling our intent at this point when we've got significant investment and strategic discussions coming up around shared service models around water. So really concerned about some of the unintended consequences about an embrace of user pays as a general way forward. And finally, yes, choices, absolutely. Money drives choices. And some of those choices will have very real consequences by taking people off of a safer route and putting them into harm's way. And I don't think that those are the kind of choices we want to be encouraging in our community. So please, for those who are on the fence or have perhaps leaned towards opposing this notice of motion, please do join us for it. We need to send as strong a message as possible that we've got our communities back on this and that we need to have a toll-free Te Ahu Aotearoa. Thank you.
Right, we'll ask you to vote, please. No. Did the council lodge a submission to Te Aroha to be kept free of road tolling? Moved by Councillor Barrett and seconded by Councillor Johnson. If you could vote, please. That's passed, 11 votes for and 4 against. Right, I think the Mayor's got a second recommendation. If you can put that up.
Kia ora. Thank you, Madam Chair. Look, I'll try and keep this brief, and I think I've heard a number of views that hopefully this is less contentious. Look, colleagues, in principle, there's a reason why NZTA have put this in front of the Minister. There just is not enough money. We're going to hear about that a little bit later this afternoon. That's a new word. That in principle, we've got to look at other options, including tolls on future new roads and highway projects. I've kept it quite generic because we've got to go with some sort of solutions, and I think this will be a bipartisan sort of arrangement with whoever's in government, because there will need to be other revenue streams. I was speaking last night at Woodville, and it was evident that Tararua people were okay with this, as long as they know about it at the start of a discussion, not at the end of it, opening of a replacement road. So I got their sort of general feedback on it as well. As I said to you, we've already got quite strong support from the heavy users of, heavy transport users in the freight industry, distribution industry, and their lobby organisations of Transporting New Zealand. So I think this is sending that influential message, as well as the message, very simple message we've just voted on before. So I hope you can support this, because I do think we're going to have to find some other revenue streams. I think there's an opportunity for us to influence some decisions coming around our way. We are now the nexus for Wellington, Hawke's Bay, Taranaki, Wanganui, and that central region around distribution and logistics, and a number of highways come through us. So it's around influence what those new highway projects, ring road, etc., may look like. So I hope you can support this, and I do believe it's somewhat less contentious than the last decision. Thank you.
Councillor Bowen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I do support this in principle, Mr. Mayor, but I am going to suggest an amendment, which I wonder if, bearing in mind the comments you've just made, you'd be willing to amalgamate. Otherwise, Councillor Hancock will second, to simply add on to the end of that. In principle, Palmerston North City Council supports the option of tolls on future new road and highway projects where that is signalled in advance of the project. Because otherwise we just end up back where we are today, of broken promises.
I'm okay with the second phrase.
Yeah.
So to add on to the end, where that is signalled in advance of the project.
Okay. We just need to keep things moving.
Yep. So, yeah, thank you for taking that as part of the recommendation. I think that does address the very debate we've been having today about we want to act to represent our community, we want to act in good faith with our community and with the government agencies who are tasked with delivering this work for the government. We want to be really clear about what Palmerston North City Council's aspirations are and clear about our commitment to those projects. And by setting that out clearly at this stage, then I think we can do all of those things.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Councillor. The Deputy Mayor.
Tēnā koe te tiamana o tira tātou. I'm in support of that, but I just also wanted to highlight, because it was written in the motion, notice of motion, that they've got, this should not be seen as taking or indicating a position on future projects that are still being in the planning stages. So, I was really pleased to see that in there, and just highlighting that was in the notice of motion as well. Kia
Okay.
ora. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thanks, Deputy Mayor. Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Madam Chair. A question to the mover, if I may. Just want to understand, obviously supportive of this, but what do you mean? Do you mean that this is something that will be a part of our submission, or are we just making a sort of in-principle policy decision for the council at large? Like, is this, what's your intention of this?
Oh, sorry.
That absolutely, it should be. So we are going to say no to what we've just voted in quite a strong majority, but we do say, perhaps the last paragraph, but in principle, we support the option of tolls on future new roading highway projects which signalled at the start of projects. I think that's exactly where we should be
So
going.
it's part of the submission. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Michelard.
Oh, thank you, Madam Chair. In principle, I also support this. I think this is less contentious than what we previously discussed. And personally, I think looking at the news articles that have been coming out of this. Sorry?
We haven't got a lot of time.
All right. Looking at the news articles that have been coming out, there's been a desire, to toll the road and not toll as equally and that sort of thing. But the thing that I wanted to talk about was also, largely around what we talked about around NZT and not initially, consulting the community on this and that sort of thing. And I think personally, in as much as this is actually addressing that for future, it needs to be signaled and that sort of thing. But I think in my comment, I would like to say also that, I think NZT has been unfairly targeted in the sense that this is a new government policy, and they might not have anticipated this 3, 4, 7 years ago when the new road was being built or designed or planned. So the criticism that, they didn't listen or they didn't give signals initially, I think is unfair. So I'm going to use my time of comment just to highlight that as well. And we're not here to serve the government of the day. Yes, it's true. We're here to serve the community. I'm here because I want to serve my community to the best of my abilities. So me voting for tolls or against tolls doesn't mean that I'm against my community and that sort of thing. But we all have different views of how we go around this as well. So, but yeah, as in saying that, it's a government policy of the day.
Thanks, Councillor. Okay, right, we're going to vote on this. Oh, sorry, do you want to write, do we, really? Okay, thank you. I'll tell you why we're in a hurry. I'll tell you that in a minute. We can vote on this. Thank you. I'll tell you in a minute, Billy. Okay, that's passed 15 votes for. So, alternative motions. Okay, so items 10, 11, 12 and 13. Can I just finish my sentence, Councillor? Items 10, 11, 12, 13 are all going to my next meeting. Okay? Would you like to give me any advice on that, Councillor? Not in the mood. We're now going to move to item 14, which is on page 131. So we're just going to... What? We just need to receive the officer's advice. We did. Oh. No, we're just going to... Yes. Okay, we didn't receive the officer's advice, so do you want to move that, William? And Councillor Dennison would love to second it. No, it's been moved by Councillor Wood and seconded by Councillor Dennison. So we're just receiving the officer's advice. Can we vote on that, please? Councillor Dennison? Don't need to comment on it. No, you're very welcome. You don't need to say anything. If we can just vote on that, please. We're doing this because we've got a 2:30 meeting. That's why we're doing it with an external party. So we're doing that, and we have to have part 2, so that's why we're doing this. So if we can just vote on this, thank you, everyone. And Councillor Johnson said it wasn't going to be a busy day. Didn't you, Councillor Johnson? You did? Okay, so we're now done that. We're going to go to the work schedule, which is on page 131. Oh, so that was passed 15 votes for, none against. Schedule 131, if I can go to you, David, is there anything you would like to raise?
No comment, Madam Chair, other than the 20th of November is going to be a busy day as well.
Okay, and now we'd like to move into... what, sorry? We're voting first. Yeah, would you like to move that? I'll move it, seconded by Councillor, by myself. Yeah, great, we'll just move on. Vote on that, please. So if everyone voted on that, please. That's moved, 12 votes for and none against. And now we're moving into part 2. So part 2. And part 2 will start directly at 1:30. So we've got lunch now, okay? We're doing a vote on this to go into part 2, so if we could just have that vote. Moved by Councillor Wood, seconded by Councillor Hapara to go into part 2. We just have to vote on it. There's an external coming as well, everyone. Stephen Cornwall. Okay, thank you, everyone. Last vote. And Councillor Wood is chairing part 2. That's it. We'll see you all back here at 1:30.